What if Harry bonded with the Whomping Willow and could control every magical plant? Chapter 1. The Willow's Touch. Harry sprinted across the Hogwarts grounds, rain pelting his glasses and thunder cracking overhead. Perfect. Just perfect. Quidditch practice had run late, and now he was caught in the worst storm of the term. Lightning flashed, illuminating the castle in the distance, still too far away. Bloody hell, he shouted as his foot slipped on the muddy grass, sending him tumbling down the slope. He rolled, unable to stop himself, his wand flying from his grip. The world spun in a blur of gray sky and dark earth until he slammed hard into something solid. Pain shot through his shoulder. Harry groaned and pushed himself to his knees, squinting through rain-spattered glasses. A massive, gnarled trunk loomed before him. His stomach dropped. The Whomping Willow. No, 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 Harry scrambled backward, but too late. One of the massive branches was already swinging toward him. He threw his arms up instinctively, bracing for impact. The blow never came. The branch stopped inches from his face, trembling as if fighting against itself. Harry froze, hardly daring to breathe. The entire tree shuddered, its limbs swaying not with aggression but something that looked almost like confusion. Another flash of lightning struck, directly into the willow's uppermost branches. Harry felt it like an electric shock ripping through his body. He screamed, falling back onto the muddy ground as the willow's branches thrashed wildly. Pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced, worse than the Cruciatus curse, worse than his scar burning, consumed him. It wasn't just physical, it felt like something foreign was forcing its way into his mind, ancient and alien and alive. Images flashed through his consciousness, roots extending deep into the earth, raindrops falling through leaves, centuries passing in seconds. He felt the slow pulse of sap, the stretching toward sunlight, the patient power of growth breaking through stone. Then everything went black. Harry. Harry. Wake up, mate. Ron's voice pulled Harry back to consciousness. He blinked, finding himself in the hospital wing, surrounded by concerned faces, Ron, Hermione, and Madame Pomfrey hovering nearby. What? Harry's voice cracked. His throat felt like sandpaper. You've been unconscious for nearly 6 hours, Hermione said, her brow furrowed with worry. Hagrid found you collapsed by the Whomping Willow. We thought, her voice caught. Well, nobody survives an attack from that tree. But I wasn't attacked, Harry said, struggling to sit up. His head pounded. It stopped. And then lightning hit, and he trailed off, unsure how to explain the bizarre sensations he'd experienced. Madame Pomfrey pushed a goblet into his hands. Drink this, Potter. You've had a severe shock. The potion tasted like bitter herbs and earth. As Harry drank, he became acutely aware of a small potted plant on his bedside table. It was nothing special, just a common magical fern used in healing potions. But somehow, he could feel its presence, like a soft hum at the edge of his consciousness. That's bizarre, he murmured, staring at the plant. What is? Ron asked. Harry hesitated. Nothing. Just feeling weird. Madame Pomfrey insisted Harry stay overnight for observation, despite his protests. After his friends left, Harry lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The strange awareness hadn't faded. If anything, it was growing stronger. He could sense every plant in the hospital wing, the ferns, the healing herbs drying in bunches from the ceiling, even the wooden bed frame, though it was much fainter, like a distant echo. He closed his eyes and concentrated on the potted fern. To his astonishment, he could almost hear it. No, not hear exactly. Feel it. Its simple existence, growing, drinking, stretching toward light. No complex thoughts, just basic needs and responses. Harry's eyes snapped open. I'm going mental, he whispered to the empty room. By morning, Harry felt physically better, though the strange awareness of plants lingered. Madame Pomfrey reluctantly released him with instructions to return immediately if he experienced any unusual symptoms. Too late for that, Harry thought, hurrying to catch the end of breakfast in the great hall. "Mate, you look terrible," Ron said through a mouthful of toast as Harry slid onto the bench beside him. "Thanks," Harry replied dryly, reaching for a glass of pumpkin juice. Hermione studied him with narrowed eyes. "Are you sure you're all right? Perhaps you should take the day off." "I'm fine," Harry insisted, though "fine" didn't begin to describe how he felt. The great hall was overwhelming. He could sense every wooden table, every flower arrangement, every piece of fruit in the bowls. It wasn't loud or painful, just persistently there, like background music he couldn't turn off. "We've got herbology first thing," Ron groaned. "Sprout's going to make us repot those jumping beans again." Harry perked up. Herbology might actually be interesting today. Ron and Hermione exchanged concerned glances. "Since when do you find herbology interesting?" Ron asked suspiciously. Harry shrugged, unwilling to explain what he barely understood himself. "Just feeling different today, I guess." Greenhouse 3 buzzed with activity as second-year Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs gathered around the central table. Professor Sprout beamed at them over a collection of vibrating pots. "Today we'll be continuing our work with leaping legumes," she announced cheerfully. "Remember, gentle but firm handling is key." The moment Harry stepped fully into the greenhouse, he nearly staggered. The awareness that had been a background hum suddenly amplified tenfold. Every plant in the room seemed to call out to him simultaneously, not with words, but with presence and sensation. The venomous tentacula in the corner radiated aggression and hunger. The mandrakes beneath their soil coverings pulsed with irritable awareness. Even the ordinary herbs lined along the windowsills gave off distinct impressions. The basil was content in the sunlight, while the mint felt cramped and eager to spread. "Harry?" Hermione nudged him. "You've gone all pale." "It's nothing," Harry whispered, forcing himself to focus on Professor Sprout's instructions. They broke into pairs, and Harry found himself working with Neville, much to his relief. Neville's natural talent in herbology meant Harry could be slightly distracted without causing disaster. As they began carefully repotting their jumping beans, Harry discovered something remarkable. When he touched the plants, the strange awareness sharpened, becoming almost like communication. He could sense the beans' agitation and their desire for more root space. "They don't like being confined," Harry murmured, gently coaxing a particularly feisty bean into its new pot. "They need room to stretch." Neville looked at him curiously. "That's exactly right, Harry. How did you know?" "Most people think they jump because they're aggressive, but they're actually just uncomfortable." Harry shrugged uncomfortably. "Just guessed." Throughout the lesson, Harry found himself instinctively understanding what each plant needed. When Seamus's bean refused to settle, Harry reached over without thinking. "May I?" he asked, taking the pot. "It's too dry. They like moisture when they're transplanted." He sprinkled water around the roots, and immediately the beans stopped struggling and nestled into the soil. "Blimey, when did you become a plant expert?" Seamus asked, impressed. Harry noticed Professor Sprout watching him with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Potter, that was an excellent observation about the moisture needs of leaping legumes." 5 points to Gryffindor. By the end of class, Neville was looking at Harry with undisguised curiosity. As they cleaned up, he finally spoke. "Harry, no offense, but you've never shown much talent for herbology before. What's changed?" Harry hesitated. Neville was the least likely person to think he was crazy for claiming to sense plants' feelings. "I'm not sure. Since that accident with the Whomping Willow, I've been noticing plants more." "Noticing how?" Neville pressed, his usual shyness overcome by genuine interest. "I can feel them," Harry admitted quietly. "Not like touching, but I know what they need. What they want. It's hard to explain." Instead of looking skeptical, Neville's eyes widened with excitement. That's incredible. There are legends about wizards who could communicate with plants, but it's considered mostly myth. My gran has books about ancient plant magic, before wands were even common. Harry felt a flood of relief that Neville believed him. Do you think that's what's happening to me? I don't know, but it's fascinating, Neville said. We should. Their conversation was interrupted as Professor McGonagall entered the greenhouse, her expression severe. Attention, students. Please proceed directly to the Great Hall after class. The headmaster has an announcement regarding staffing changes. A ripple of whispers spread through the greenhouse. With the defense against the dark arts position vacant yet again after Professor Lockhart's disastrous year, everyone had been wondering who would fill the role. The Great Hall buzzed with speculation as students from all houses gathered for the unexpected announcement. At the staff table, Harry noticed an unfamiliar figure seated beside Professor Flitwick, a tall, lean man with iron-gray hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore deep green robes with intricate embroidery that resembled vines or roots. Who's that? Ron asked, following Harry's gaze. Must be the new defense teacher, Hermione replied. He looks interesting. Harry felt an odd sensation as he studied the stranger. There was something about him that triggered his new awareness, though he couldn't identify what. Dumbledore rose from his seat, and the hall fell silent. Good morning, students. I apologize for interrupting your schedules, but I wanted to personally introduce our new defense against the dark arts professor, who has arrived earlier than anticipated. Please welcome Professor Cassius Blackthorne, who has graciously agreed to fill the position for the remainder of the year. Polite applause filled the hall as Professor Blackthorne stood. He gave a slight bow, his eyes scanning the students with a sharp, assessing gaze. When his eyes landed on Harry, they lingered for a moment too long, and Harry felt a chill run down his spine. Thank you, Headmaster, Blackthorne said, his voice deep and smooth. I look forward to teaching at Hogwarts. In these uncertain times, a proper defense education is more important than ever. I intend to ensure you're prepared for whatever dangers you might face, both common and uncommon. Another round of applause followed as he sat down. Harry couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. He seems intense, Ron commented. Hope he's better than Lockhart, at least. That's not a high bar, Harry replied, still watching Blackthorne, who was now engaged in conversation with Professor Sprout. Something about their interaction seemed off. Sprout's normally friendly expression had turned guarded. We have defense class tomorrow, Hermione said, checking her schedule. I suppose we'll find out what he's like then. After dinner that evening, Harry slipped away from the common room, telling Ron and Hermione he needed fresh air. The strange awareness of plants had been overwhelming him all day, and he felt drawn back to where it had begun, the Whomping Willow. The storm had passed, leaving a clear, cool evening. The grounds were quiet as Harry approached the willow cautiously, stopping well outside its striking range. In the moonlight, the massive tree looked almost peaceful, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. Harry took a deep breath and closed his eyes, focusing on the tree the way he had with the plants in the greenhouse. Immediately, he felt the willow's presence, ancient, powerful, and surprisingly alert. Unlike the simpler plants, the willow had something closer to consciousness, not human-like, but complex and aware. Hello, Harry whispered, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a tree. The willow's branches stilled. Harry felt a shift in its awareness, like being noticed. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward, crossing into the range where the tree would normally attack. The branches remained still. Heart pounding, Harry took another step. One low-hanging branch moved, not striking, but extending toward him like a curious finger. Harry raised his hand, and the tip of the branch gently touched his palm. The connection that flooded through him was staggering. Images, sensations, impressions, not words, but clear communication nonetheless. The willow recognized him. The lightning had forged something between them, a bond that had awakened dormant magic in Harry, magic that connected him to the ancient power of plants. Potter. What do you think you're doing? Harry jumped, spinning around to find Professor Blackthorn standing several yards away, his wand illuminated. The willow's branches immediately withdrew, though they didn't become aggressive. I was just, Harry stammered. Step away from that tree immediately, Blackthorn commanded, striding forward. The Whomping Willow is extremely dangerous. It wasn't attacking me, Harry said, reluctantly moving away. Blackthorn's eyes narrowed. Indeed. Most curious. He studied Harry intently. You're Harry Potter. It wasn't a question, but Harry nodded anyway. I heard about your accident yesterday. Surviving an encounter with the Whomping Willow is unusual. Returning for a second encounter suggests either remarkable bravery or remarkable foolishness. Harry said nothing, uncomfortable under Blackthorn's scrutiny. Tell me, Mr. Potter, have you noticed anything different since your accident? Blackthorn asked, his voice deceptively casual. Harry tensed. Something warned him not to reveal his new abilities. Just a headache, sir. Madame Pomfrey said it was normal after a shock. Blackthorn studied him for a long moment. I see. Well, headache or not, wandering the grounds after dark is ill-advised. Return to your dormitory, and we'll overlook this incident. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, Harry said, eager to escape the professor's unsettling presence. As he hurried back toward the castle, Harry glanced back once. Blackthorn hadn't moved. He stood watching the Whomping Willow with an expression that, even at a distance, Harry could recognize as covetous. The next morning, Harry found himself cornered by Neville before breakfast. Harry, I've been thinking about what you said in herbology, Neville said excitedly. I wrote to my gran last night, and she's sending some of those books I mentioned. They have information about ancient plant magic. Brilliant, Neville. Thanks, Harry said, genuinely grateful. But maybe keep this between us for now. I'm still trying to figure out what's happening. Of course, Neville agreed. But you should know, whatever's happening to you is rare. Really rare. The last documented case of a wizard communicating with plants was over 2 centuries ago. Harry groaned. Great. Another way I'm a freak. No. Neville said firmly, surprising Harry with his conviction. It's not a bad thing. Plant magic is one of the oldest forms of magic, pure and powerful. Before wands, before spells, wizards worked with the natural magic in living things. His eyes shone with enthusiasm. This could be amazing, Harry. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for Neville's support. Thanks. I hope you're right. Defense against the dark arts that afternoon was an exercise in tension. Professor Blackthorn's classroom had been transformed, potted plants of various magical species lined the walls, and preserved specimens floated in jars on shelves. Welcome, Blackthorn said as the class settled. Today we begin with the fundamentals of magical defense. But first, a question. What is the oldest magic known to wizard kind? Hermione's hand shot up. Miss Granger, I believe. Blackthorn nodded to her. Most magical historians consider elemental magic the oldest form, sir. A common misconception, Blackthorn replied. Before wizards commanded elements, they communicated with living things, particularly plants, which contain innate magic of their own. The oldest recorded wizards were botanists of a sort. Harry sat up straighter, thinking of what Neville had told him. Plants can be both tools and threats in magical defense, Blackthorn continued, pacing the classroom. Many of the most dangerous magical creatures evolved from plants, devil's snare, venomous tentacula, even the Whomping Willow. His eyes found Harry's. Mr. Potter, I understand you recently had an encounter with our ground's most famous flora. The class turned to look at Harry, who shifted uncomfortably. Yes, sir. And yet you survived unscathed. Remarkable luck. Something in Blackthorn's tone made Harry bristle. Maybe the tree was just having an off day, sir. Several students laughed nervously. Blackthorn's expression remained impassive. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's more to it. The Whomping Willow was planted here for a specific purpose, not merely as a hazard for unwary students. Its magical properties are significant. Harry felt Blackthorn was speaking directly to him, testing him somehow. The professor turned away, continuing his lecture. Throughout history, certain wizards demonstrated unusual connections to plant life, abilities to influence, communicate with, or even control magical flora. Such talents were highly valued, and often feared. The lesson continued with more conventional defensive spells, but Harry remained distracted. Blackthorn's knowledge of plant magic and his interest in Harry's encounter with the willow couldn't be coincidental. After class, Blackthorn called out, "Potter, a word." Harry reluctantly approached the desk as his classmates filed out. Ron and Hermione hesitated at the door, but Harry nodded that they should go on. "Is something wrong, Professor?" Harry asked once they were alone. Blackthorn studied him, fingers steepled. "I'm curious about your affinity for herbology. Professor Sprout mentioned you showed remarkable insight in yesterday's lesson." Harry shrugged. "Just lucky observations." "Indeed." Blackthorn leaned forward. "Potter, let me be direct. Unusual magical talents often manifest after traumatic events or magical accidents. If you've experienced any changes since your encounter with the willow, it would be wise to discuss them with a qualified instructor." "Why are you so interested in the Whomping Willow, sir?" Harry countered, his suspicion overriding caution. Something flickered in Blackthorn's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at Harry's directness. "Professional curiosity. The willow is a rare specimen with unique magical properties. Any unusual interaction with it would naturally be of academic interest." Harry nodded noncommittally. "I'll let you know if I notice anything unusual, Professor." Blackthorn smiled thinly. "See that you do. You may go." Harry left quickly, unable to shake the feeling that Blackthorn knew exactly what was happening to him, and had specific reasons for his interest that went beyond academic. "He gives me the creeps," Ron said later as they sat by the common room fire. "Knows his stuff, though." "I found his lecture on plant-based magic fascinating," Hermione said. "It's rarely covered in the standard curriculum." Harry remained silent, staring into the fire. He'd been debating whether to tell Ron and Hermione about his developing abilities. They were his best friends, but he wasn't sure how to explain something he barely understood himself. "Harry? You've been quiet all evening," Hermione observed. "What did Blackthorn want after class?" Harry sighed. "He was asking about the Whomping Willow. Seems very interested in my lucky escape." "That is odd," Hermione frowned. "Though I suppose it is unusual that you weren't injured." Harry made a decision. They deserved to know. "There's something I need to tell you both. Since the accident, I've been different." He explained everything, the strange awareness of plants, the ability to sense their needs, and his recent communication with the willow. Ron's jaw dropped. "You can talk to plants?" "Bloody hell. Not talk, exactly," Harry clarified. "It's more like, feeling what they feel. Understanding them." "That's extraordinary magic, Harry," Hermione said, looking both concerned and fascinated. "And potentially powerful. No wonder Blackthorn's interested." "Neville says it's an ancient form of magic," Harry added. "He's getting some books from his grandmother that might help explain it." "Neville knows?" Ron asked, looking slightly hurt. "He figured it out in herbology," Harry explained. "I was going to tell you both, I just wanted to understand it better first." Hermione was already in full research mode. "We should check the library. There must be information about this kind of magic, though probably in the restricted section." "I don't want this getting out," Harry said firmly. If Blackthorn is as interested as he seems, I'd rather keep it quiet until I know what's happening and why he cares so much. His friends nodded in agreement, though Hermione looked troubled. Harry, if this ability is growing, you'll need to learn to control it. What if it becomes overwhelming? Harry hadn't considered that. The plant awareness had already intensified in just 2 days. What if it continued? I'll figure it out, he said with more confidence than he felt. Maybe the willow can teach me. Over the next week, Harry's abilities continued to develop at an alarming rate. What had started as vague impressions became clear communications. He found himself instinctively understanding not just what plants needed but their histories, how long they'd been growing, what conditions they'd endured, even faint impressions of people who had tended them. In herbology, he excelled for the first time, much to Professor Sprout's surprise and Neville's fascination. They worked together after classes, with Harry practicing his growing abilities and Neville providing his extensive botanical knowledge. Try to direct it, Neville suggested one afternoon as they sat in a quiet corner of Greenhouse 2. Don't just receive impressions, send them back. Harry focused on a struggling snapdragon, feeling its distress. It needed more iron in its soil. Instead of just knowing this, he tried to project reassurance, a promise of care. To his astonishment, the plant visibly perked up, its wilting leaves straightening slightly. It worked! Neville exclaimed. Harry, do you know how extraordinary this is? Harry did know, and it terrified him as much as it excited him. The power was growing faster than he could control it. Each evening, Harry returned to the Whomping Willow, which had become something of a mentor. The ancient tree couldn't communicate in words, but its century of experiences provided guidance. Through their connection, Harry began learning to manage the constant influx of plant awareness, to filter and focus instead of being overwhelmed. He was careful to visit only after dark and to keep watch for Blackthorn, who seemed to be developing a habit of patrolling near the willow. Meanwhile, Hermione had been researching furiously, smuggling books from the restricted section under Harry's invisibility cloak. There's not much, she admitted, spreading ancient tomes across a table in an unused classroom. But what I've found suggests that plant magic, or botanomancy, as it was called, was once highly respected. Why did it die out? Harry asked, leafing through a crumbling manuscript filled with illustrations of wizards communing with enormous trees. The same reason many old magics faded, the development of wand-focused spellcasting was more accessible, more standardized. Botanomancy required innate talent and years of development. When wands made magic available to any wizard with basic training, the older arts declined. So I'm like a magical throwback, Harry said dryly. You're special, mate, Ron corrected. Always have to be different, don't you? His tone was light, but Harry detected a hint of the familiar jealousy that sometimes crept into their friendship. Trust me, I'd trade this for normal in a heartbeat, Harry said. Yesterday I had to sprint out of potions because the gillyweed Snape was using screamed in my head when he cut it. Ron winced sympathetically. Hermione looked thoughtful. The bond with the willow seems to be helping you manage it, though. Perhaps what you need is deeper practice, not less connection. Harry nodded. That's what I've been thinking. The willow is teaching me to filter, to choose what I pay attention to instead of being bombarded by every plant around me. There's something else, Hermione said hesitantly. Some texts mention botanomancers developing physical abilities too, enhance strength or resistance to certain magics. Have you noticed anything like that? Harry hadn't, but the possibility was intriguing. Not yet. But it's only been a week. We should test it. Ron suggested, suddenly enthusiastic. See if you can lift me. I'm not going to try to lift you, Ron, Harry laughed. Their research session was interrupted by a commotion in the hall outside. They hurried out to find a crowd gathering around a second-year Hufflepuff girl who was sobbing hysterically, her hands covered in angry red welts. What happened? Hermione asked a nearby student. She was working on a herbology project in one of the small greenhouses, the Hufflepuff boy explained. Something attacked her, one of the plants went mental, according to her friend. Harry felt a chill. Which greenhouse? The tropical one, I think. Professor Sprout's already headed there. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. I should check it out. We're coming with you, Ron said firmly. They slipped away from the crowd and hurried across the grounds to the small greenhouse dedicated to tropical magical plants. Through the glass, they could see Professor Sprout and, surprisingly, Professor Blackthorn, examining something near the back. Be careful, Sprout was saying as they entered. I've never seen it behave this way before. The professors turned at their entrance, Sprout looking surprised and Blackthorn's eyes narrowing at the sight of Harry. Mr. Potter, this area is currently restricted, Sprout began. I heard about the accident, Harry said. I thought I might be able to help. Blackthorn stepped forward. And how exactly would you help, Potter? Harry hesitated, but the situation demanded honesty. I have a way with plants, sir. Indeed. Blackthorn's gaze intensified. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. Sprout looked confused. Cassius, what are you talking about? This is a dangerous situation, a student has been injured. Precisely why Mr. Potter's affinity might be valuable, Blackthorn replied smoothly. Show us, Potter. Harry approached the back of the greenhouse, where a large tropical vine had broken free of its trellis and was writhing aggressively, its tendrils whipping the air. Even from several feet away, Harry could sense its distress, confusion, pain, and rage. Something's wrong with it, Harry said, closing his eyes to focus. It's in pain. Like it's been tampered with. Can you calm it? Professor Sprout asked, her initial skepticism fading as she watched Harry's confident approach. Harry nodded, stepping closer. The plant's tendrils slashed toward him, but he raised his hand, projecting calm and reassurance the way he practiced with smaller plants. The vine hesitated, then slowly relaxed its aggressive posture. That's it, Harry murmured. I'm not going to hurt you. With the plant calmer, Harry could sense more clearly what was wrong. Something had been introduced to its soil, a potion or substance that was causing it pain and unnatural aggression. Someone put something in its pot, Harry said, looking back at the professors. It's being poisoned or magically altered. Sprout gasped. Who would do such a thing? Blackthorn's expression was unreadable. Fascinating, Mr. Potter. Your talent with plants is remarkable. Harry turned his attention back to the vine, which was now curling around his arm, not to attack but seeking comfort, like a cat might rub against a friendly hand. We need to repot it, Harry said. Fresh soil. And maybe a purifying solution. Of course, Sprout agreed, hurrying to gather supplies. Remarkable, Potter. Simply remarkable. As they worked to save the plant, Harry felt Blackthorn's eyes on him constantly. When he glanced up, the professor's expression was one of calculated interest that made Harry deeply uncomfortable. By the time they finished, the vine was resting peacefully in fresh soil. Sprout was beside herself with amazement at Harry's abilities. Potter, I've never seen anything like it. You have an extraordinary gift. Thank you, Professor, Harry said awkwardly. I'm still learning how it works. How long have you had this ability? Blackthorn asked directly. Harry hesitated, but with the demonstration he'd just given, there was little point in denial. Since the accident with the Whomping Willow. The lightning strike did something. Fascinating, Blackthorn murmured. A magical awakening triggered by elemental energy and an ancient magical plant. Quite rare. Will the student who was attacked be all right? Hermione asked, changing the subject. Miss Abbott will recover, Sprout assured them. But this is troubling. The substance in the soil appears deliberately placed. Someone wanted that plant to attack students? Ron asked incredulously. Or it was an experiment, Blackthorn suggested. To test the plant's reaction to magical stimuli. Something in his tone made Harry suspect the professor knew more than he was saying. As they left the greenhouse, Blackthorn placed a hand on Harry's shoulder, stopping him. "Potter, with an ability like yours, you need proper guidance. I have experience with rare magical talents. My office, tomorrow after dinner. We'll discuss how to develop your gift properly." It wasn't a request. Harry nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Professor." After Blackthorn strode away, Ron whispered, "You're not actually going, are you?" "I don't think I have a choice now," Harry replied grimly. "But I don't trust him. Something's not right about his interest in my abilities." "We'll figure it out," Hermione assured him. "At least Professor Sprout knows now." She seemed genuinely impressed, not suspicious like Blackthorn. Harry nodded, but couldn't shake his uneasiness. His secret was out, at least to the faculty. How long before the entire school knew? Word spread quickly. By breakfast the next day, whispers followed Harry through the corridors. Plant Speaker and Botanomancer were the kinder terms. Others called him Freak or Willow Boy. Just like second year with the Parseltongue, Harry muttered as they sat down for breakfast. "It'll blow over," Ron said optimistically. "And hey, at least talking to plants isn't associated with dark wizards like snake language is." "Actually," Hermione said hesitantly, "I found a reference that might explain Blackthorn's interest. There was a group of dark botanomancers centuries ago, the Thorn Circle. They believed in dominating plants rather than communicating with them, bending nature to their will completely." "Great," Harry groaned. "So either Blackthorn thinks I'm a dark wizard in training, or he's one himself." "We don't know that," Hermione cautioned. "But be careful with him tonight." Harry nodded, poking at his breakfast without appetite. He was saved from further discussion by the arrival of the morning mail. A large, heavy package dropped in front of Neville, who beamed. "It's from Gran. The books on plant magic." Neville unwrapped the package to reveal several ancient-looking tomes bound in what appeared to be bark rather than leather. "These are family heirlooms," Neville explained proudly. "The Longbottoms kept records of old magics even after they fell out of favor. Gran says you're welcome to borrow them as long as you need." "Thanks, Neville," Harry said sincerely. "This might help me understand what's happening." "I've been reading ahead," Neville said eagerly. "There's a chapter on plant bonds, magical connections between wizards and specific magical plants. Like what you have with the Whomping Willow." "What does it say about them?" Harry asked, suddenly very interested. "They're symbiotic. The wizard gains abilities, and the plant gains protection and purpose. But the most interesting part," Neville lowered his voice excitedly, "is that the bond can extend to other plants. The primary plant becomes a sort of conduit for wider communication." Harry thought of how the willow had been helping him manage his growing awareness of other plants. It made sense. "Does it say anything about control? Not just communication, but actually directing plants?" Neville nodded. "That's where it gets complicated. True botanomancers could influence plants to act against their nature, making them grow in specific patterns, or even using them as weapons. But it required deep connection and respect. The darker practitioners tried to force control through domination, which eventually corrupted both the plants and the wizards. Like the Imperieuse curse versus willing cooperation, Hermione observed. "Exactly," Neville agreed. "The books emphasize partnership over mastery." Harry found this reassuring. He had no desire to control plants, the idea of forcing his will upon them felt wrong, especially after experiencing their consciousness firsthand. "We should study these before your meeting with Blackthorn," Hermione suggested. "The more you understand your abilities, the less vulnerable you'll be to manipulation." Harry nodded, grateful for his friend's support. "Let's skip history of magic and find somewhere quiet." Hermione looked scandalized but didn't object. They spent the afternoon in the room of requirement, which had transformed itself into a perfect study space complete with comfortable chairs, good lighting, and even a few benign magical plants for Harry to practice with. The Longbottom books were revelatory. They described botanomancy not as mere communication with plants but as a profound magical art that connected wizards to the fundamental life force of the magical world. Plants, being rooted in earth and reaching toward sky, served as perfect conduits between elemental magics. "Listen to this," Hermione said, reading from one volume. "The true botanomancer does not seek to bend nature to wizards' will, but to align wizards' will with nature's purpose. In this harmony lies power beyond common magics." "Sounds very zen," Ron commented, flipping through a book of his own. "Hey, this one has pictures of wizard plant bonds. Some bloke actually merged with a venomous tentacula, nasty business, ended up half-plant himself." "That's extreme cases," Neville clarified. "Usually the bond remains spiritual and magical, not physical." Harry tried to absorb it all while practicing with a small potted fern. He'd progressed from merely sensing its needs to actually directing its growth, encouraging it to curl its fronds in specific patterns. "This feels natural," he said, surprised by how effortless it had become. "Like the plant wants to work with me." "Because you're not forcing it," Neville explained. "You're suggesting and encouraging, not commanding." As evening approached, Harry felt better prepared for his meeting with Blackthorn. He understood more about his abilities and their potential, though many questions remained. "Remember," Hermione cautioned as they packed up, "don't reveal how much you know. Let him explain things as though you're completely in the dark. And if he says anything dodgy, just make an excuse and leave," Ron added. "We'll be waiting in the common room." Harry nodded, grateful but anxious. "I still don't understand why the Willow chose me, or why this is happening now." "Perhaps it's not about why," Neville suggested thoughtfully. "Perhaps it's about what you'll do with it." Professor Blackthorn's office had been transformed from its previous incarnations under other defense teachers. Gone were Lockhart's self-promoting portraits and Quirrell's garlic garlands. Instead, the walls were lined with preserved plant specimens, some familiar from herbology, others Harry had never seen before. Glass cases contained what appeared to be ancient artifacts, stone tablets with plant motifs, wands made from unusual woods, and small statuettes depicting wizards merged with trees. "Ah, Potter. Punctual. Excellent." Blackthorn gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." Harry sat cautiously, eyes drawn to a familiar-looking branch mounted prominently on the wall behind Blackthorn's desk. "Yes, you recognize it," Blackthorn said, following his gaze. "A branch from a Whomping Willow, not Hogwarts specimen, of course, but one of its cousins from the Carpathian Mountains. Remarkable trees. Ancient magic runs in their sap." "You seem to know a lot about magical plants, sir," Harry observed. "For a defense against the dark arts teacher." Blackthorn smiled thinly. "My expertise is broader than my current position suggests, Potter. Before teaching, I spent decades researching ancient magical practices, particularly those involving botanical elements." He stood, pacing slowly behind his desk. "What you're experiencing is extraordinarily rare in modern times. A true plant bond, awakened by chance and circumstance. Do you understand how significant that is?" "I'm beginning to," Harry replied carefully. "No, I don't think you are." Blackthorn leaned forward. "Modern wizardry has become too dependent on wands, on spoken incantations, on rigid methodology. The oldest, purest magics required no such crutches. They flowed directly from the wizard's connection to magical forces." His intensity was unsettling. Harry remained silent, remembering Hermione's advice to let Blackthorn reveal his own knowledge. "Your bond with the Whomping Willow is merely the beginning," Blackthorn continued. "With proper guidance, you could develop abilities beyond anything taught at Hogwarts. The ability to control any plant, to command nature itself." There it was, control, not communication. Just as Neville had warned about darker practitioners. I don't want to control plants, Harry said firmly. I want to understand them. Blackthorn's expression hardened momentarily before smoothing into a smile. Of course. Poor choice of words on my part. Understanding comes first. But eventually, you'll want to direct your gift more precisely. He moved to a cabinet and removed a small vial containing a swirling green liquid. I've developed this potion through years of research. It temporarily enhances botanical sensitivity in ordinary wizards. For someone with your natural connection, it would dramatically accelerate your development. Harry eyed the vial suspiciously. Thank you, sir, but I think I'd prefer to develop naturally. Admirable caution, Blackthorn conceded, replacing the vial. Perhaps when you trust me more. For now, let me offer some practical guidance. The bond you formed requires nurturing. Visit the willow regularly, strengthen your connection. And keep a journal of your experiences with different plants. The advice seemed reasonable, much to Harry's surprise. There's something else troubling you, Blackthorn observed shrewdly. The overwhelming sensations, perhaps. The constant awareness of every plant around you. Harry nodded reluctantly. It can be distracting. That's natural in the early stages. Your mind hasn't learned to filter properly. Blackthorn removed a small object from his desk drawer, a polished seed the size of a walnut. Carry this. It's from an ancient silencing sycamore. It will help dampen the background noise, so to speak, allowing you to focus only on plants you actively choose to engage with. He offered the seed to Harry, who hesitated before accepting it. The moment it touched his palm, Harry felt a curious dampening effect. The constant hum of plant awareness receded, becoming a distant murmur rather than a persistent chorus. That's better, Harry admitted, genuinely relieved. Keep it with you. Consider it a tool for your development. Blackthorn returned to his seat. We should meet weekly to monitor your progress. And Potter, his eyes sharpened, I would suggest discretion regarding the extent of your abilities. Not everyone at Hogwarts will understand or appreciate such rare magic. Yes, sir, Harry agreed, standing to leave. The warning seemed sensible, though Harry suspected Blackthorn's motives for secrecy had little to do with Harry's welfare. One last thing, Blackthorn said as Harry reached the door. Have you sensed anything unusual from the Forbidden Forest lately? The question caught Harry off guard. He had, in fact, been aware of strange disturbances, a sense of awakening, of movement just beyond his perception. Nothing specific, sir, he lied. Should I have? Blackthorn studied him for a moment too long. No. Merely curious. Good night, Potter. He gave you a magical object and you just took it. Hermione exclaimed when Harry recounted the meeting in the common room. Harry, it could be dangerous. I know it was risky, Harry admitted. But it works. The constant plant noise is finally manageable. He handed her the silencing sycamore seed. Hermione examined it carefully, casting several detection charms. I don't sense anything harmful, she conceded reluctantly. But his interest in you is still suspicious. What about the forest? Ron asked. Have you been sensing something weird? Harry nodded. For days now. Something's happening out there, something big. The plants are responding to something. Reacting. Like they're afraid? Neville asked. Not exactly afraid, Harry tried to explain. More like anticipation. Awakening. It's hard to describe. The injured student, the questions about the forest, Blackthorn's up to something, Hermione concluded. We need to find out what. I say we check out the forest ourselves, Ron suggested. Absolutely not, Hermione replied firmly. Whatever's happening could be dangerous. I need to talk to the willow again, Harry decided. It might know what's happening. It's been here longer than any of us, even the teachers. The following night, Harry slipped out under his invisibility cloak. The silencing sycamore seed had made everyday life more manageable, but now he tucked it into his pocket, wanting his full awareness for communing with the willow. The ancient tree seemed to be expecting him. Its branches swayed gently in greeting as Harry approached, and he felt its consciousness reaching for his, eager, almost urgent. "What's wrong?" Harry asked quietly, placing his hand against the trunk. The impressions that flowed into him were complex and troubling. The willow was concerned, something in the forest was changing, growing stronger. Something ancient, like the willow itself, but with different purpose. The willow showed Harry images of the forest from its perspective over decades, cycles of growth and dormancy, the natural rhythm of magical flora. Now that rhythm was disrupted. "What is it? What's awakening?" Harry pressed. The willow couldn't name it, plants didn't think in such terms, but conveyed a sense of a central force, a consciousness spreading its influence throughout the forest's plant life. Not malevolent exactly, but powerful and increasingly active. More troubling were the impressions of human interference. Someone was accelerating the process, provoking the forest entity deliberately. "Blackthorn," Harry whispered, and felt the willow's agreement. Their communion was interrupted by a sharp crack from the direction of the forest. Harry turned to see a flash of light deep among the trees, followed by an unnatural silence, as if every creature in the forest had suddenly gone still. The willow's branches trembled, and Harry felt its alarm. Whatever was happening, it wasn't natural. Making a split-second decision, Harry pulled out his wand and ran toward the forest's edge. The willow's branches reached after him in warning, but Harry was already beyond its reach. At the forest boundary, Harry hesitated. The darkness beyond the first line of trees was absolute, and even with his heightened awareness of plants, he felt blind compared to the openness of the grounds. "Lumos," he whispered, and his wand tip ignited. As he took his first steps into the forest, the plant awareness hit him like a physical wave, hundreds, thousands of consciousnesses pressing against his mind. Without the silencing seed to dampen it, the sensation was overwhelming. Harry staggered, leaning against a tree for support. The tree, an ancient oak, responded to his touch with surprise and then recognition. It knew him, or rather knew what he was. A botanomancer. A plant friend. Harry took a deep breath and focused, using the techniques he'd learned from the willow to filter the cascade of impressions. Gradually, the chaotic chorus resolved into manageable layers of awareness. And then he felt it, what the willow had tried to show him. A presence in the forest, a consciousness flowing through the root systems, connecting plants that should have been separate. Not a single entity but a network, awakening and expanding. Harry followed the sense of disturbance deeper into the forest. The feeling of unnatural silence grew stronger, along with a prickling sensation that he was being watched, not by creatures, but by the forest itself. A faint glow appeared ahead. Harry extinguished his wand and crept forward cautiously, using trees for cover. In a small clearing, a hooded figure knelt beside what appeared to be a massive, gnarled root protruding from the ground. The figure was applying some kind of potion to the root, which pulsed with an eerie blue-green light. Harry moved closer, trying to get a better look, but his foot snapped a twig. The sound, though slight, seemed deafening in the unnatural quiet. The figure whirled around, hood falling back to reveal Professor Blackthorn's face, contorted with anger. "Who's there?" he demanded, raising his wand. "Show yourself." Harry remained frozen behind a large tree, hardly daring to breathe. Through his connection, he could feel the root drinking in whatever potion Blackthorn had applied, its energy spreading outward through the forest floor. Other plants were responding, their own energies shifting, aligning with the root's pulsing rhythm. Blackthorn prowled the edge of the clearing, his wand illuminating the surrounding trees. "I know someone's here." "Potter, is that you?" Harry pressed himself tighter against the tree, silently begging it not to betray his presence. The tree, sensing his distress, seemed to understand, its bark roughened and darkened around him, making him blend into its trunk. After several tense minutes, Blackthorn returned to the root. No matter. The work progresses regardless of interruptions. He gathered his materials and with a final, suspicious glance around the clearing, disappeared deeper into the forest. Harry waited until he was certain Blackthorn was gone before approaching the root. It pulsed with unnatural vitality, and when Harry cautiously touched it, the impressions nearly knocked him unconscious: age, power, and hunger. This was no ordinary plant. It was part of something vast and ancient, something that had been dormant for centuries and was now being deliberately awakened. He withdrew his hand, deeply troubled. Whatever Blackthorn was doing, it involved manipulating forest magic on a scale Harry couldn't fully comprehend. He needed to tell someone, Dumbledore, perhaps, but what exactly would he say? That he could sense plants' feelings and they were telling him something bad was happening? Harry made his way back to the castle, his mind racing. The silencing seed remained in his pocket. He needed the full awareness now, overwhelming as it was. One thing was certain: Professor Blackthorn wasn't merely interested in Harry's abilities for academic reasons. He was pursuing something much more dangerous, and Harry's connection to the Whomping Willow somehow figured into his plans. The Forest Ancient, Neville whispered the next morning, pointing to a passage in one of his grandmother's books. They were huddled in the library, Harry having just recounted his midnight discovery. "What's that?" Ron asked, peering at the ancient text. "A legend, or what I thought was just a legend," Neville explained. "Deep in the oldest magical forests, plant life can develop a collective consciousness over centuries. Not a single entity, but a network of interconnected awareness, centered around the oldest tree or root system. The ancient druids believed these forest consciousnesses were the purest form of earth magic." "And you think that's what's in the Forbidden Forest?" Hermione asked skeptically. "A plant, hive mind." "It fits what I felt," Harry confirmed. "Not one plant, but many acting as one. And incredibly old." "The book says they're naturally dormant most of the time," Neville continued. "They only become active when threatened or, when deliberately awakened through ritual." "Which is exactly what Blackthorn was doing," Harry said grimly. "The question is why? What does he want with an awakened forest ancient?" "Power," Hermione suggested. "If it's as old and magical as Neville says, controlling it would give him access to incredibly potent magic." "But he can't control it directly," Neville pointed out. "According to this, only a true botanomancer could communicate with a forest ancient. Someone with a natural bond to magical plants," Harry finished, understanding dawning. "Like me." "That's why he's so interested in you," Ron exclaimed. "He needs you to control this forest thing." Harry felt cold. "He's been grooming me. The private lessons, the silencing seed to gain my trust, he's been preparing me to help him." "But for what purpose?" Hermione pressed. "What would he gain by awakening and controlling the forest ancient?" "The book mentions forest ancients having unique powers," Neville said, scanning the text. "They can alter the magical properties of plants within their network, accelerate growth, even create new hybrid species. Some druids believed they could grant extended life or magical enhancement to wizards who knew how to commune with them. Immortality and power, the usual stuff dark wizards want," Ron summarized. "We need to tell Dumbledore," Hermione insisted. Harry nodded, but before they could move, a commotion erupted in the library entrance. Madame Pants was arguing with Professor McGonagall, whose normally stern expression looked genuinely alarmed. "What's happening?" Harry asked a Ravenclaw hurrying past their table. "Something's attacking the greenhouses," the boy replied. "Professor Sprout's trying to contain it, but plants are going crazy everywhere." Harry exchanged glances with his friends and bolted for the grounds, the others close behind. Outside, chaos reigned. Vines had erupted from Greenhouse 3, smashing through the glass and writhing across the lawn. Students and teachers were backing away as Professor Sprout attempted to subdue the plants with containment spells. Harry's plant awareness exploded with input, panic, aggression, confusion from the greenhouse plants, and underneath it all, the pulsing influence he'd felt in the forest the night before. The forest ancient's awakening was affecting all plant life on the grounds. "Mr. Potter." Professor McGonagall called, spotting him. Professor Sprout suggested you might be able to assist. All eyes turned to Harry. There was no hiding his abilities now. "I'll try," he said, stepping forward. Drawing a deep breath, Harry approached the thrashing vines. He could feel their confusion. They were responding to the ancient's call without understanding why, their natural behaviors amplified to destructive levels. Harry knelt and placed both hands on the ground, closing his eyes to focus. He reached out with his awareness, not to the vines directly but to the earth beneath them, to their roots. "It's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to do this. You're safe here." He projected calm and reassurance, creating a counter-rhythm to the ancient's pulsing influence. Slowly, gradually, the vines' movements became less frantic. They began responding to Harry's gentle guidance, retreating from their aggressive expansion. "That's it," Harry encouraged, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of maintaining so many connections simultaneously. "Back to your soil. Back to your pots." The vines began to withdraw, slithering back toward the shattered greenhouse. The watching crowd murmured in amazement. As Harry worked, he became aware of another presence. Professor Blackthorn had arrived and was watching him with calculating interest. Finally, the last vine retreated into the greenhouse. Harry slumped, exhausted from the mental exertion. "Remarkable, Potter," Professor Sprout said, helping him to his feet. "Simply remarkable. I've never seen anything like it." "Indeed," Blackthorn agreed, stepping forward. "Potter demonstrates an extraordinary gift. One that might be crucial in understanding what's happening to the plant life around Hogwarts." His gaze met Harry's, challenging and knowing. They both understood what was happening, but only Blackthorn knew the full extent of his plans. "What exactly is happening, Professor Blackthorn?" Professor McGonagall asked sharply. "You mentioned research into magical botanical disturbances. Do you have insight into this incident?" "I have theories," Blackthorn replied smoothly. "The Forbidden Forest contains many ancient magical species. It's possible one has entered an unusual growth cycle, affecting other plants in the vicinity." "That's not what's happening," Harry said before he could stop himself. All eyes turned to him again. "What do you mean, Potter?" McGonagall pressed. Harry hesitated, glancing at Blackthorn, whose expression had hardened. "I think something's being awakened in the forest," Harry said carefully. "Something old and powerful that affects all the plants connected to it." "And how would you know this?" Blackthorn asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Because I can feel it," Harry replied, meeting his gaze defiantly. "Through my connection with the plants. The same connection you've been so interested in, Professor." A tense silence followed. McGonagall looked between them, sensing the undercurrent of confrontation. "I believe," she said finally, "that this matter requires the headmaster's attention. Both of you, come with me." Dumbledore listened patiently as Harry explained everything, the bond with the Willow, his developing abilities, what he'd witnessed Blackthorn doing in the forest, and what they'd learned about the forest ancient. Throughout Harry's account, Blackthorn remained silent, his expression carefully neutral. When Harry finished, Dumbledore turned to the defense professor. "Do you have anything to add, Cassius?" Blackthorn smiled thinly. "Potter has a vivid imagination, fueled by a magical talent he barely understands. What he witnessed was standard magical botanical research, nothing more sinister than that." "And the forest ancient?" Dumbledore pressed. "A myth," Blackthorn dismissed. "Folklore from an era when wizards attributed sentience to every magical occurrence they couldn't explain." "Yet you seem remarkably knowledgeable about this myth," Dumbledore observed mildly. "I'm a scholar of magical history. I'm familiar with many myths." Dumbledore turned to Harry. "Your connection to plants is genuine, Professor Sprout has confirmed this beyond doubt. If you sense something awakening in the forest, I am inclined to take that seriously." "Headmaster," Blackthorn interjected, with respect, basing serious decisions on the untrained impressions of a 13-year-old boy seems unwise, however unusual his talents may be. I quite agree, Dumbledore replied pleasantly. Which is why I propose we investigate directly. Tonight, we shall visit the location in the forest where Harry witnessed your research. Perhaps seeing it firsthand will clarify matters. Blackthorn's composure slipped momentarily. That's unnecessary. My work is delicate and, I insist, Dumbledore said, his gentle tone belied by the firmness in his eyes. Professor McGonagall will accompany us, along with Mr. Potter, whose unique perspective may prove valuable. As you wish, Blackthorn conceded, though Harry could see fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Excellent. Until then, I suggest we all return to our regular duties. Professor Blackthorn, I must ask that you refrain from entering the forest alone before our expedition tonight. Blackthorn nodded stiffly and departed without another word. Once he was gone, Dumbledore turned his piercing blue gaze to Harry. Now, Harry, tell me more about this remarkable bond you've developed with the Whomping Willow. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Harry could barely focus on his classes, his mind consumed with thoughts of the coming forest expedition. Blackthorn was conspicuously absent from defense against the dark arts, replaced by a harried-looking substitute who assigned reading without explanation. Do you think he's run for it? Ron whispered as they pretended to read their textbooks. No, Harry replied. Whatever he's planning, he won't abandon it easily. He's invested too much time. By dinner, rumors were circulating about Professor Blackthorn's absence and the morning's greenhouse incident. Harry found himself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. They're calling you the Plant Whisperer, Ginny informed him as she sat down beside them in the Great Hall. Fred and George are already taking bets on whether you can make the venomous tentacula do tricks. Harry groaned. Fantastic. Look on the bright side, Ron said through a mouthful of shepherd's pie. At least they're not calling you the heir of Slytherin anymore. As they were finishing dinner, Professor McGonagall approached the Gryffindor table. Potter, the headmaster requests your presence for our expedition. Meet at his office in 20 minutes. Harry nodded. Yes, Professor. After she left, Hermione gripped his arm. Be careful, Harry. Whatever Blackthorn's been doing in that forest, it's dangerous. I know, Harry replied. But Dumbledore and McGonagall will be there. And I've got the Willow's guidance now. Take this, Neville said, pressing a small vial into Harry's hand. Extract of whisper weed. It enhances plant communication temporarily. Might help if you need to reach out to the forest plants quickly. Harry pocketed the vial gratefully. Thanks, Neville. I might need it. 20 minutes later, Harry found himself following Dumbledore, McGonagall, and a clearly displeased Blackthorn across the darkened grounds toward the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid waited at the forest edge with Fong, a crossbow over his shoulder. Evening, Professors. Harry, Hagrid greeted them. Ready when ya are. Thank you, Hagrid, Dumbledore said pleasantly. We'll follow Harry's lead, as he knows the location we seek. Harry nodded and stepped into the forest, immediately opening his awareness to the plants around them. The sensation was overwhelming, far stronger than the previous night. Every tree, bush, and blade of grass seemed alive with unusual energy, pulsing in rhythm with a distant source. This way, Harry said, turning toward the disturbance he felt. As they walked deeper into the forest, even those without Harry's abilities began to notice strange phenomena. Vines moved against the breeze. Flowers opened and closed as they passed. Trees seemed to lean in, their branches reaching toward the group with apparent curiosity. The forest is watching us, McGonagall observed tensely. Responding to our presence, Dumbledore corrected. Fascinating. Blackthorn remained silent, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the increasingly animated plant life around them. They reached the clearing Harry had discovered the previous night, but it had transformed dramatically. The exposed root had grown enormously, now rising from the earth like a throne. Smaller roots and vines had woven themselves into intricate patterns across the clearing floor, forming what appeared to be ritualistic symbols. Mere botanical research, Cassius? Dumbledore asked mildly. Blackthorn's calm facade finally cracked. You understand nothing, Dumbledore. None of you do. This, he gestured to the transformed clearing, is the awakening of magic in its purest form. Magic that predates our wand-waving and incantations. Magic that flows directly from the earth itself. Magic you've been artificially stimulating, McGonagall countered. To what end? Blackthorn's eyes gleamed with fervor. Power. Knowledge. Immortality. The forest ancient holds secrets lost for centuries, secrets I've spent my life trying to uncover. At what cost? Harry asked, sensing the distress in the surrounding plants. You're forcing something that should happen naturally, if at all. The plants are suffering. Temporary discomfort for eternal benefit, Blackthorn dismissed. The ancient is awakening. Soon it will reach full consciousness, and with the right conduit, his gaze locked onto Harry, it can be directed, controlled. That's why you were so interested in my connection to the willow, Harry realized aloud. You need someone who can communicate with the ancient. Not just communicate, Blackthorn corrected. Bond with it, as you did with the willow. Become its master, as is the rightful place of wizards over magical flora. Harry shook his head. That's not how it works. The bond is partnership, not mastery. A child's understanding, Blackthorn sneered. The Thorn Circle understood the truth, plants exist to serve wizards, not to partner with them as equals. The Thorn Circle? McGonagall repeated sharply. That dark sect was disbanded centuries ago. Not disbanded, Blackthorn corrected. Driven underground. Preserving knowledge, waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances. He spread his arms. And now, finally, we have both. Without warning, he drew his wand and slashed it in a complex pattern. The woven roots in the clearing floor glowed with sudden blue light, and a shock wave of magic rippled outward. Harry felt it like a physical blow to his plant awareness, a command, a call to action that resonated through every growing thing around them. The forest exploded into motion. Vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid before they could react. Even Dumbledore, caught off guard by the speed and suddenness of the attack, found himself immobilized. Harry alone remained untouched. The plants swerved around him, responding to his botanomancer presence even amidst Blackthorn's control. You see? Blackthorn said triumphantly. They recognize what you are. What we both are. Join me, Potter. With your natural talent and my knowledge, we could command power beyond anything Dumbledore has dreamed. Harry, don't listen. McGonagall called, struggling against the vines binding her. Dumbledore remained calm despite his predicament. Consider what you're being asked to do, Harry. Not just the offer, but the philosophy behind it. Harry stood unmoving, feeling the conflicting pulls on the forest flora, Blackthorn's ritualistic control versus the true nature of the plants. And beneath it all, the growing consciousness of the ancient, confused and increasingly agitated by the unnatural commands being forced upon it. I'll never join you, Harry said firmly. What you're doing is wrong. Plants aren't tools to be used, they're living beings with their own purpose. Blackthorn's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. I had hoped for your willing participation, but the ritual will work regardless. He flicked his wand, and more vines erupted, this time wrapping around Harry's ankles, dragging him toward the central root throne. I've prepared for this moment for decades, Blackthorn continued, approaching the throne. The ancient will awaken fully tonight, and its power will flow through a human vessel, willing or not. As the vines pulled Harry closer to the throne, he felt the ancient's presence growing stronger, curious about him, about his plant bond. Unlike the willow's friendly consciousness, the ancient felt alien and complex, a tapestry of thousands of interlinked plant minds spanning centuries. "Harry!" Dumbledore called. "Remember what you've learned about your connection. It's about harmony, not control." Harry closed his eyes, concentrating not on fighting the vines but on communicating with them. They responded to Blackthorn because of his ritual magic, but Harry had something more fundamental, a natural bond with plant life. He reached into his pocket and uncorked Neville's vial, swallowing the whisperweed extract in one gulp. Immediately, his awareness expanded exponentially. Every plant in the forest became clear to him, from the smallest moss to the oldest trees. And at the center, the ancient, not a single entity but a vast, interconnected consciousness spanning the entire forest. Harry reached out to it directly, not with commands but with understanding. "I see you. I feel you. I respect what you are." The ancient's attention shifted, focusing on this strange human who spoke not with magic that commanded but with awareness that recognized. Harry felt its curiosity, its confusion at being pulled from dormancy by Blackthorn's rituals. "What are you doing?" Blackthorn demanded, sensing the shift in the forest's energy. "Stop that." Harry ignored him, deepening his connection to the ancient. "He's trying to control you, to use you. But that's not why you exist. You have your own purpose." The ancient's response came not in words but in images, in feelings, cycles of growth and rest, of nurturing the forest through centuries, of maintaining balance between magical forces. Its awakening should have been gradual, natural, part of a cycle spanning decades. Blackthorn's rituals had forced it into consciousness prematurely, painfully. "Enough!" Blackthorn shouted. He began a complex incantation, his wand tracing glowing sigils in the air. The root throne pulsed with unnatural energy, and Harry felt the ancient recoil in distress. In that moment, Harry made a decision. Rather than fighting the vines pulling him toward the throne, he let them bring him closer. But instead of resisting the ancient's power, he opened himself to it completely, not seeking to control but to connect, to understand. As his hands touched the massive root, a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever experienced flowed through him. Not the painful invasion of his initial bond with the willow, but a vast opening of awareness, seeing the forest through thousands of perspectives simultaneously, feeling the slow, patient power of centuries-old growth. Blackthorn's ritual faltered as he witnessed what was happening. "No. That's not how it's supposed to work. You need to dominate it, control it." But Harry was doing the opposite. He was surrendering to the connection, allowing the ancient to recognize him as a friend, not a master. And in that surrender, he found something Blackthorn had never understood, true partnership with the natural magic of the forest. The vines holding Dumbledore and the others began to loosen as Blackthorn's control wavered. The forest responded to the harmonious connection Harry had established rather than the forced commands of ritual magic. "Stop this!" Blackthorn cried, desperation evident in his voice. He aimed his wand at Harry. "Imperio!" The unforgivable curse hit Harry squarely, but in his merged state with the ancient's consciousness, its effect was muted, distorted. He felt the command trying to take root in his mind: control the ancient, bend it to your will, but the vastness of his expanded awareness simply absorbed the curse like a drop in an ocean. Dumbledore, free from his bindings, moved with surprising speed for his age. With a flick of his wand, Blackthorn was disarmed and bound in conjured ropes. "It's over, Cassius," Dumbledore said gravely. But it wasn't over. The ancient, now fully awakened and connected to Harry, was responding to decades of manipulation and interference. The entire clearing began to tremble as roots erupted from the earth, trees swayed dangerously, and vines whipped through the air with increasing violence. "Harry!" McGonagall called in alarm. "It's becoming unstable." Harry felt it, the ancient's confusion turning to anger, centuries of dormant power threatening to lash out indiscriminately. Through their connection, he understood its intention: to purge the forest of human presence entirely, to return to isolation and eventually to dormancy. "Wait," Harry communicated. Not all humans seek to control you. Some understand partnership, respect. He showed the ancient his experiences with the Whomping Willow, the mutual benefit of their bond. He shared Neville's reverence for plants, Professor Sprout's careful tending of magical flora, even Hagrid's protective care of the forest creatures. The violent movement of the forest plants slowed as the ancient considered Harry's perspective. It had known humans only as threats or exploiters for centuries, Blackthorn being merely the most recent example. The concept of partnership was foreign, forgotten. "Let me show you," Harry offered. "Let me help rebuild trust between your world and mine." The ancient's response was cautious but curious. The clearing gradually calmed, though the awakened power remained palpable in the air around them. "Remarkable," Dumbledore murmured, watching Harry communicate with the forest consciousness. "Simply remarkable." Harry finally withdrew his hands from the root throne, the connection gently fading to a manageable level. He felt changed by the experience, his understanding of plant magic fundamentally expanded. "It's willing to coexist," Harry explained, his voice hoarse. "But it won't be controlled or exploited. It's returning to a dormant state gradually, not forced like Blackthorn wanted." "And what of your connection to it?" McGonagall asked. "It remains," Harry said, feeling the faint, friendly pulse of the ancient's awareness. "Not dominance, but recognition. Mutual respect." Blackthorn laughed bitterly from where he lay bound. "You fool. You had the power of centuries at your fingertips, and you chose to release it. The Thorn Circle was right, modern wizards have forgotten what true power is." "On the contrary," Dumbledore replied mildly. "Harry has demonstrated the most fundamental magical truth, that power without wisdom destroys itself. The Thorn Circle fell because they sought dominion rather than harmony." As they led Blackthorn from the forest, Harry felt the trees around them responding to his presence, not with the frantic energy of before, but with gentle acknowledgement. The forest was settling, the ancient retreating to its natural rhythm, but the connection remained. At the forest's edge, Harry paused, looking back at the dark trees silhouetted against the night sky. Something fundamental had changed, not just in the forest, but in him. His bond with the Whomping Willow had been just the beginning. Now he understood that his path as a wizard would be different from his peers, bridging worlds that had grown separate over centuries. The Whomping Willow stood silently on the moonlit grounds, its branches swaying gently in greeting as Harry emerged from the forest. He smiled, feeling its welcome. His first plant friend, the beginning of his journey. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. He had his human friends, yes, but also a growing network of plant allies, from the ancient, patient wisdom of the forest ancient to the protective strength of the willow. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had found yet another unexpected path in the magical world. Not just a wizard, but a botanomancer, a bridge between worlds too long divided. As he walked back toward the castle with Dumbledore and McGonagall, plants responded to his passing, flowers turning toward him, grass rippling in his wake. Small acknowledgements of a connection reborn after centuries, a forgotten magic remembered. Chapter 2, Roots of Power. News about Harry's plant abilities spread through Hogwarts faster than fiendfire. By breakfast the next morning, first years were asking him to make flowers bloom in their hands, and Fred and George had started selling Plant Whisperer Potter badges that sprouted tiny leaves when tapped with a wand. "This is worse than the heir of Slytherin business," Harry groaned, slouching at the Gryffindor table as a group of Hufflepuffs pointed and whispered. "At least then people were afraid to bother me." "Cheer up," Ron said, cramming toast into his mouth. "You could be famous for something way worse. Remember Lockhart?" Harry snorted despite himself. "Fair point." Hermione arrived, dropping a stack of ancient-looking books onto the table with a thud. "I've been in the library since dawn. Professor McGonagall gave me special permission to access the historical archives." "Of course she did," Ron muttered. "These are journals from wizards who studied plant magic centuries ago," Hermione continued, ignoring him. Some of their observations about botanomancers might help you understand what's happening with your abilities. Harry picked up the top volume gingerly. Its cover was made from what appeared to be pressed leaves, preserved through magic into a leather-like material. Thanks, Hermione. This could be really useful. There's something else, she said, lowering her voice. Blackthorn's being held in a secured room while the Ministry decides what to do with him, but he's not talking. Dumbledore's concerned that whatever he did to the Forest Ancient might not be completely reversible. Harry frowned. It seemed calmer when we left last night. The Ancient, I mean. For now, Hermione agreed. But Professor Sprout reported strange behavior in the greenhouses this morning, plants growing at accelerated rates, responding to stimuli that shouldn't affect them. Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall's voice interrupted their conversation. Harry looked up to see the deputy headmistress standing behind him. The headmaster would like a word after you've finished breakfast. Yes, Professor, Harry replied. McGonagall nodded and strode away, her emerald robes swishing. Wonder what Dumbledore wants, Ron said. Harry shrugged, but he had a pretty good idea. His newfound abilities raised a lot of questions he wasn't sure he had answers for yet. Dumbledore's office was as fascinating as ever, filled with silver instruments that whirred and puffed smoke. Fawkes the Phoenix trilled a greeting from his perch, and Harry was surprised to feel a flicker of awareness from the bird, not plant-like, but somehow connected to his expanded senses. Ah, Harry, thank you for coming, Dumbledore said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I trust you're recovering from our adventure last night. Yes, sir, Harry replied, taking the seat. He noticed a small potted plant on Dumbledore's desk that hadn't been there during his previous visits, a miniature willow tree, its delicate branches swaying gently without any breeze. I see you've noticed my new companion, Dumbledore said with a smile. A cutting from the Whomping Willow, taken with its permission, of course. Professor Sprout assisted. I thought it might be helpful in our conversation. Harry reached out with his awareness to the miniature willow. It recognized him immediately, its tiny branches quivering with what felt like excitement. It remembers me, Harry said, surprised. Indeed. The willow's consciousness extends to all parts of itself, even when separated. Quite remarkable magic. Dumbledore leaned forward, his bright blue eyes intent. Which brings me to the reason for our meeting. Your connection with plants is unprecedented in recent wizarding history, Harry. While there are historical accounts of similar abilities, no living wizard has demonstrated what you showed last night. I'm still figuring it out myself, sir, Harry admitted. It feels natural now, but I don't really understand how it works or what I can do with it. That is precisely my concern, Dumbledore said gently. Great power without understanding can be dangerous, not because you intend harm, but because magic often has consequences beyond our immediate perception. Harry nodded, remembering how overwhelming the Ancient's consciousness had been. The Forest Ancient is still there, in my mind. Not controlling anything, just present. Like it's watching through me sometimes. Dumbledore's expression grew serious. As I feared. Professor Blackthorn, for all his misguided intentions, was correct about one thing: the Ancient represents an enormous magical power, one that has been dormant for centuries. Your connection to it must be handled with great care. What should I do? Harry asked. Learn, Dumbledore replied simply. Understand your abilities through practice and study. I've arranged for you to have special sessions with Professor Sprout to develop your skills in a controlled environment. And I believe Mr. Longbottom has already proven himself a valuable ally in this area. Harry nodded. Neville understands plants better than anyone. And he has books from his grandmother about ancient plant magic. Excellent. The Longbottom family has preserved much knowledge that the wider wizarding world has forgotten. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. There is one more matter we should discuss. Professor Blackthorn was not working alone. Harry sat up straighter. The Thorn Circle. He mentioned them in the forest. Yes. While most believe that organization disbanded centuries ago, it appears they merely became more secretive. We found correspondence in Blackthorn's quarters suggesting other members exist, continuing their work to revive ancient plant domination magics. So there could be others like him out there? Harry asked, stomach sinking. It is a possibility we must consider, Dumbledore confirmed. Which makes your development all the more important. You represent a different path, plant magic based on harmony rather than control. That philosophy may prove crucial in the days ahead. Harry felt the weight of this responsibility settling over him. Just when he thought his life couldn't get more complicated than being the boy who lived. I'll do my best, Professor. I know you will, Harry. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Now, I believe you have herbology this morning. Professor Sprout is quite eager to see what you'll do next. Herbology had become Harry's favorite class overnight. As he entered Greenhouse 3 with the other Gryffindors, he felt an immediate sense of welcome from the plants inside, a chorus of green awareness greeting him like old friends. Professor Sprout beamed as he approached the workbench. Potter. Excellent timing. I've prepared something special today that might interest you particularly. She gestured to a row of unusual seedlings, each glowing with faint bioluminescence. Moonlight sage, incredibly rare and temperamental. They typically take months to coax into maturity, but perhaps with your special touch, we might accelerate the process. The class watched eagerly as Harry approached the seedlings. He could sense their delicate life force, their potential for growth. Unlike most plants, these had a distinctly magical quality, their awareness slightly sharper, more responsive. What do they need? Harry asked, gently touching one of the tiny stalks. That's what I'd like you to tell us, Professor Sprout replied with undisguised excitement. Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the seedling under his fingers. Its needs flowed into his awareness, water with a specific mineral content, yes, but more importantly, magical energy of a particular frequency. These plants fed on moonlight, storing and processing its unique magical properties. They need moonlight energy, Harry said, opening his eyes. But they can't wait for nightfall. They're hungry now. Acting on instinct, Harry raised his wand. Lumos Lunaris, he whispered, surprising himself with a spell he'd never consciously learned. His wand tip glowed with a silvery light distinctly different from the standard Lumos charm. The seedlings responded immediately, stretching upward, their stems elongating and leaves unfurling as they absorbed the moonlight energy. The class gasped as the plants visibly grew, transforming from tiny sprouts to adolescent herbs in seconds. Extraordinary. Professor Sprout clapped her hands in delight. Absolutely extraordinary. Potter, how did you know that spell? Harry stared at his wand, equally amazed. I didn't. It just came to me when I understood what the plants needed. The plants taught you the spell, Neville said quietly beside him. That's how the old botanomancers worked. They didn't learn magic from books, they learned directly from magical plants themselves. The rest of the class was spent with Harry demonstrating his abilities, helping students connect more effectively with their assigned plants. Even Draco Malfoy, who had been preparing some cutting remark, fell silent when Harry rescued his wilting specimen with a simple touch and whispered encouragement. As they packed up at the end of class, Professor Sprout pulled Harry aside. Potter, your gift is remarkable. Professor Dumbledore mentioned you'd be having some special sessions to develop your abilities. Would tomorrow evening suit you? After dinner, perhaps? That would be great, Professor, Harry agreed eagerly. Excellent. Oh, and do bring Mr. Longbottom if you'd like. His traditional knowledge complements your intuitive approach quite nicely. As Harry left the greenhouse, he felt more optimistic than he had in days. His strange new abilities weren't just a burden or a curiosity, they could be genuinely useful. Maybe being the plant whisperer wouldn't be so bad after all. His good mood lasted precisely 3 minutes, until he rounded the corner and found himself face to face with Draco Malfoy and his ever-present sidekicks. Well, if it isn't Potter the plant pal, Malfoy drawled. Moving up in the world, aren't you? First snakes, now shrubs. What's next, having heart-to-hearts with flobberworms? Shove off, Malfoy, Harry replied tiredly. Father says botanomancy is primitive magic, Malfoy continued, circling Harry like a pale shark. The kind of thing Muggleborns used before they understood proper spellcraft. Fitting for you, isn't it? Crude, instinctual magic for the boy who never bothers to learn properly. Harry felt his temper rising but forced himself to stay calm. Getting into a fight would only validate Malfoy's taunting. Funny how your father suddenly knows so much about rare magic that hasn't been seen in centuries, Harry countered. Almost like he's interested in it for some reason. Malfoy's pale face flushed slightly. My father knows about all kinds of magic, Potter. Including the dangers of meddling with forces beyond your understanding. Something in his tone made Harry pause. That sounded less like the usual schoolyard taunting and more like a warning. What's that supposed to mean? Harry demanded. But Malfoy had already regained his sneering composure. Figure it out yourself, plant boy. Come on, he added to Crabbe and Goyle, the air's getting too earthy around here. As they swaggered away, Harry frowned. There had been something off about that encounter, something beyond the usual Malfoy nastiness. Malfoy's father is definitely involved somehow, Harry insisted later as he, Ron, and Hermione huddled in the Gryffindor common room. The way he talked about meddling with forces, it was weird. Lucius Malfoy being involved with dark magic. Shocking, Ron said sarcastically. Next you'll tell me water is wet. But what would Malfoy Sr. have to do with the Thorn Circle? Hermione wondered, flipping through one of the ancient botanical texts. His family has always been focused on blood purity and traditional wizarding power structures. Ancient plant magic seems outside their usual interests. Power is power, Harry pointed out. And if the Forest Ancient is as powerful as Blackthorn believed. Speaking of which, Neville interrupted, joining their conversation, I've been corresponding with my gran about what happened. She's quite concerned. He handed Harry a letter. She sent this for you directly. Harry unfolded the parchment, reading the elegant, formal handwriting. Dear Mr. Potter, Neville has informed me of your remarkable botanical bond and the concerning events regarding the Forest Ancient. While I am heartened to hear of your natural inclination toward harmonious plant relationships rather than domination, I must caution you that what you now face is more significant than you may realize. The Forest Ancient of the Forbidden Forest is one of only 3 known to exist in Britain. Such entities are not merely collections of plants, they are living magical reservoirs, preserving forms of magic that predate our current understanding. The attempt to forcibly awaken and control such an entity would have catastrophic consequences beyond mere botanical disturbances. I have taken the liberty of sending some additional materials that may assist your development. Botanical magic requires not only innate talent but disciplined practice. The path you have begun is ancient and honorable, but not without peril. Should you require more direct guidance, I would be willing to visit Hogwarts at Professor Dumbledore's convenience. Some knowledge is best transmitted in person rather than through text. With respect and concern, Augusta Longbottom, your grandmother sounds worried, Harry said, handing the letter back to Neville. She is, Neville confirmed. Gran doesn't typically offer to leave home for anything less than a genuine crisis. If she's volunteering to come to Hogwarts, she considers this extremely serious. But Blackthorn's been caught, Ron pointed out. Crisis averted, right? Hermione shook her head. Dumbledore told Harry that Blackthorn wasn't working alone. And now we have hints that Lucius Malfoy might be connected somehow. This isn't over. Harry was about to respond when a strange sensation washed over him, a pulse of awareness from outside the castle. The plants on the grounds were suddenly agitated, responding to something. And beneath that immediate disturbance, he felt the Forest Ancient's consciousness stirring, more active than it had been since the confrontation with Blackthorn. Something's happening, he said abruptly, standing up. Outside. What is it? Hermione asked, alarmed by his sudden change. I don't know exactly, but the plants are reacting to something. We need to check it out. They hurried through the castle corridors and out onto the grounds. The evening air was cool and still, the sky darkening toward twilight. At first glance, everything seemed normal, until Harry noticed movement near the edge of the forbidden forest. There, he pointed. The trees are moving. Indeed, the outermost trees of the forest were swaying despite the lack of wind, their branches stretching and contracting like tentacles testing the air. That doesn't look good, Ron muttered. Harry expanded his awareness toward the forest, trying to understand what was happening. The impressions that came back were chaotic, agitation, confusion, and a strange sense of testing boundaries. The ancient was pushing outward, extending its influence beyond its normal range. It's the ancient, Harry explained, walking cautiously closer to the forest edge. It's exploring. Trying to extend its reach. Is it dangerous? Hermione asked, staying close behind him. Not exactly aggressive, Harry said, concentrating on the sensations flowing from the forest. More curious. Unsettled. Like it's not sure of its boundaries anymore. As they watched, a thick vine suddenly shot from the forest undergrowth, whipping across the ground toward them with alarming speed. Harry reacted instinctively, reaching out with his mind to connect with the vine. Stop. We're not threats. The vine halted mid-motion, its tip raised like a cobra considering its options. Harry could feel its simple consciousness, an extension of the ancient's will, sent to investigate these humans at its border. Harry, Neville whispered, try to communicate with it. Not just commands, show it who you are. Harry nodded, focusing on projecting his memories of connecting with the ancient the previous night, of choosing harmony over control. The vine quivered, processing this information, then slowly retreated back into the forest. That was bloody brilliant, Ron breathed. And concerning, Hermione added. If the forest ancient is extending vines outside its boundaries, something has disturbed it. Harry frowned, stretching his awareness further toward the forest. Beyond the immediate boundary activity, he sensed something deeper in the woods, a point of disturbance, of wrongness. Something or someone was interfering with the ancient again. We need to tell Dumbledore, Harry decided. Someone's messing with the ancient again, deeper in the forest. As they turned back toward the castle, a piercing scream cut through the evening air. Near the greenhouses, a student had collapsed to the ground, clutching at their leg where a small, innocent-looking plant had apparently attached itself. That's Dennis Creevey. Ron exclaimed as they ran toward the fallen boy. Professor Sprout was already rushing from the nearest greenhouse, wand drawn. Stand back. That's a strangling sprout, it shouldn't be aggressive like this. Harry knelt beside the terrified second year. The plant, ordinarily a harmless magical herb used in calming potions, had wrapped tendrils tightly around Dennis's ankle and was steadily working its way up his calf. It's been affected by the ancient, Harry said, placing his hand near the plant. He could feel its confusion, its natural docility overridden by the disturbance emanating from the forest. Can you stop it, Mr. Potter? Professor Sprout asked urgently. Harry nodded, gently touching the plant's main stem. This isn't your nature. Release him. Return to your true self. The plant hesitated, caught between Harry's gentle guidance and the distant influence pushing it toward aggression. For a moment, Harry felt resistance, not from the plant itself but from the force manipulating it. Someone with botanical knowledge was deliberately agitating the ancient, causing this ripple effect through all plant life connected to it. Harry pushed back, drawing on his bond with the Whomping Willow for strength. I understand you better than they do. Trust me. The plant's tendrils slowly unwound from Dennis's leg, retreating back into an innocent-looking herb. Dennis scrambled away, wide-eyed with fear and gratitude. Thanks, Harry, he gasped. It just jumped at me when I walked past. Are you hurt? Professor Sprout asked, examining his leg. Angry red welts marked where the tendrils had gripped, but the skin wasn't broken. I think I'm okay, Dennis replied shakily. Professor Sprout turned to Harry with a grave expression. Potter, this isn't normal behavior for any magical plant, let alone a strangling sprout. What did you sense? Someone's interfering with the forest ancient again, Harry explained. I can feel disturbances coming from deep in the forest. It's affecting all the plants connected to the ancient's network, making them act against their nature. But Blackthorn is in custody, Professor Sprout said, frowning. He wasn't working alone, Harry replied grimly. The Thorn Circle has other members. Professor Sprout's face paled. We must inform the headmaster immediately. And I need to check all the greenhouses. If one plant has been affected, others likely have as well. As they hurried toward the castle, Harry noticed more signs of botanical disturbance, flowers closing suddenly as they passed, vines growing visibly along the walls, tree branches reaching downward as if trying to touch the ground. The influence was spreading beyond the forest, affecting all plant life on the Hogwarts grounds. I feared this might happen, Dumbledore said gravely when they reported the incidents. They stood in his office, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, and Professor Sprout, watching the headmaster pace thoughtfully. Professor Blackthorn's ritual awakened the ancient prematurely. Without proper guidance, its influence is expanding unpredictably. But someone's making it worse, Harry insisted. I can feel it, someone's deliberately agitating the ancient, pushing it toward aggression. The Thorn Circle, Professor Sprout said. They must have another member at Hogwarts or in Hogsmeade. Or they're using remote magical means, Dumbledore suggested. Certain botanical rituals can affect plant networks from a distance, particularly when the network is already destabilized. What can we do to stop it? Harry asked. Dumbledore turned to him, eyes serious behind his half-moon spectacles. You, Harry, represent our best hope. Your connection to the ancient might allow you to stabilize it, to help it resist outside influence. How would I do that? I barely understand my own abilities yet. Which is why we must accelerate your training, Dumbledore replied. Professor Sprout will begin working with you immediately. And I think, perhaps, we should accept Augusta Longbottom's generous offer of assistance. Neville perked up at this. Gran knows more about ancient plant magic than almost anyone. She's been studying it her whole life. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed. I'll contact her tonight. In the meantime, we must protect the students. Pomona, please secure the greenhouses as best you can. Mr. Potter, I must ask you to attempt something difficult. What's that, sir? Harry asked. Reach out to the ancient. Try to calm its disturbance, to help it resist whoever is manipulating it. Your connection gives you a unique ability to communicate with it directly. Harry swallowed nervously. I'll try, Professor. Not alone, Dumbledore cautioned. The forest ancient's consciousness is vast and complex. Attempting to fully engage with it could overwhelm your mind. Instead, use the Whomping Willow as an intermediary. It already shares a bond with you and is connected to the wider plant network around Hogwarts. Harry nodded, relieved. The Willow's consciousness was familiar, almost friendly compared to the alien vastness of the ancient. One more thing, Dumbledore added, his expression grave. Under no circumstances should anyone enter the Forbidden Forest until this situation is resolved. The magical plants within would be extremely dangerous in their current agitated state. That night, Harry sat alone beneath the Whomping Willow, its normally aggressive branches gentle and protective around him. The massive tree had accepted him completely since their bond formed, creating a peaceful sanctuary within its reach that was forbidden to others. He leaned back against the gnarled trunk, closing his eyes and opening his awareness to the tree's consciousness. The willow responded immediately, its presence familiar and reassuring in his mind. I need your help, Harry communicated. Something's wrong with the forest ancient. Someone's disturbing it, making it and all the plants connected to it behave strangely. The willow's response came not in words but in impressions, concern, acknowledgement, willingness. Harry felt it extending its awareness outward through its roots, which stretched far beneath the Hogwarts grounds. Those roots connected with other plants, creating a network that eventually linked to the ancient's vast system in the forest. Through the willow, Harry could sense the ancient more clearly than before. Its consciousness was turbulent, confused, like a dreamer having a nightmare. Underlying that confusion was a distinct pattern of disturbance, magical energy being fed into the system from somewhere deep in the forest, energy that carried commands to grow, to expand, to push boundaries. "Can you help me reach it?" Harry asked the willow. "Help me calm it?" The willow's branches swayed in affirmation. Harry felt it channeling its energy, creating a pathway for his consciousness to follow through the plant network. Following this connection, Harry projected his awareness toward the ancient. The contact, even buffered through the willow, was overwhelming. The ancient's mind was not human-like, not even tree-like, it was a collective consciousness spanning acres, centuries old and unfathomably complex. Harry struggled to maintain his sense of self against its vastness. "I'm here to help," Harry projected, focusing on memories of their previous connection in the clearing, when he had chosen harmony over control. "Someone is trying to manipulate you. You don't need to follow their commands." He felt the ancient's attention shift toward him, recognition, confusion, uncertainty. It remembered him, but its memories were being distorted by the external influence pushing it toward expansion and aggression. Harry showed it images of balance, of natural cycles, of the peaceful coexistence that had existed at Hogwarts for centuries. "This is your true nature," he reminded it. "Not aggression, not domination, harmony." For a moment, he felt the ancient's consciousness steadying, its influence on the surrounding plant life gentling. The aggressive energy receded slightly. But then a surge of opposing force hit, a ritual spell pouring dark energy into the ancient's network, pushing it back toward chaos. Harry gasped at the backlash, nearly losing his connection. He could feel the source now, deep in the forest, near where he had confronted Blackthorn. Someone was there, continuing the ritual Blackthorn had started. The willow strengthened its support, its branches curling protectively closer around Harry as he maintained the tenuous connection with the ancient. He pushed back against the dark influence, using his natural affinity for plants to remind the ancient of its true purpose. It was working, slowly. The plant network around Hogwarts began to calm, the unnatural growth and movement subsiding. Harry could feel the ancient beginning to exert its own will against the external manipulation. Then, without warning, a spike of magical energy surged through the network, not just manipulation but an attack, targeted directly at the mental connection Harry had established. Pain seared through his mind as whoever was performing the ritual detected his presence and lashed out. Harry cried out, the connection shattering as he was violently thrown back into his own consciousness. The willow's branches caught him as he fell backward, gently lowering him to the ground. His head pounded and his vision swam. That had been no accident, someone had recognized his attempt to calm the ancient and had deliberately attacked his mental presence. Someone who understood plant magic and knew exactly what Harry was trying to do. As his senses cleared, Harry became aware of running footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey hurrying toward him across the darkened grounds. "Potter!" McGonagall called. "Are you all right?" The castle wards detected a magical attack. "I'm okay," Harry managed, though his head still throbbed. "But someone's definitely in the forest, continuing Blackthorn's ritual. And they knew I was trying to stop them." In the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey fussed over Harry despite his protests that he was fine. "Psychic backlash is nothing to dismiss, Potter," she scolded, pressing a goblet of steaming potion into his hands. "Drink this. It will help stabilize your mental energies." Harry grimaced at the murky green liquid but dutifully drank it down. It tasted like moss and mint, but immediately soothed the lingering pain in his head. Dumbledore arrived as Harry was finishing the potion, his expression concerned. "Harry, please tell me exactly what happened." Harry explained his attempt to calm the ancient through the willow, and the targeted attack that had broken the connection. "They knew what I was doing," Harry emphasized. "Not just that someone was interfering, but specifically that it was me, using plant magic. They attacked me directly through the botanical network." "Most troubling," Dumbledore murmured. "This confirms that we face someone with extensive knowledge of ancient plant magic, a true practitioner, not merely a dabbler like Blackthorn." "But who?" Harry asked. "Blackthorn's in custody, and I can't think of anyone else at Hogwarts who's shown interest in plant magic." "Perhaps not openly," Dumbledore replied. "The Thorn Circle has existed in secrecy for centuries. Their members learn to hide their true interests." "What about Lucius Malfoy?" Harry suggested, remembering Draco's strange comments. "His son said something odd today about meddling with forces beyond my understanding." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "Interesting. While Lucius has never shown particular interest in botanical magic, he does have connections to many old magical traditions. I will look into this possibility." Madame Pomfrey approached with another steaming goblet. "Headmaster, Mr. Potter needs rest. Whatever conspiracies you're unraveling can wait until morning." "Of course, Poppy," Dumbledore conceded with a gentle smile. "Harry, take your potion and get some sleep. Tomorrow, we will begin your formal training in earnest. Augusta Longbottom has agreed to arrive by midday." As Dumbledore left, Harry settled back against his pillows, mind racing despite his fatigue. Whoever was in the forest had recognized and attacked him through plant consciousness itself, a form of magic he'd barely known existed a week ago. They weren't just continuing Blackthorn's work, they were more skilled, more dangerous. And they knew exactly who he was. Augusta Longbottom was exactly as Harry had imagined from Neville's descriptions, stern, imposing, and impeccably dressed in formal robes and her trademark vulture-topped hat. But her eyes, when they fixed on Harry, were sharp with intelligence and unexpected warmth. "So," she said without preamble as they gathered in Dumbledore's office, "you're the young man who's formed a bond with the Whomping Willow and communicated with a forest ancient." "Quite remarkable." "It was mostly accidental, ma'am," Harry admitted. "I'm still learning what it all means." "Accidental?" Augusta raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps the initial connection, but your choice to seek harmony rather than control, that was deliberate. That was character, Mr. Potter." She turned to her grandson. "Neville has been quite impressed with your approach." Neville blushed but stood straighter under his grandmother's gaze. "Augusta has graciously agreed to provide guidance in developing your abilities, Harry," Dumbledore explained. "Her knowledge of ancient botanical magic is unparalleled in Britain." "Not entirely unparalleled, Albus," Augusta corrected. "Which is precisely our problem. There are others with similar knowledge but very different intentions." "The Thorn Circle," Harry said. Augusta nodded grimly. "I've spent decades tracking their activities. They never truly disbanded, merely went underground after the Ministry declared their practices illegal in 1705. They've operated in shadows for centuries, preserving their knowledge and occasionally attempting to revive their more ambitious projects. Like awakening and controlling a forest ancient, Hermione suggested. She and Ron had insisted on joining the meeting, and Dumbledore had surprisingly agreed. "Precisely, Miss Granger. Though they've never been so bold before. Something has changed, something has made them willing to risk exposure." "But what do they want with it?" Ron asked. "What's the point of controlling a bunch of plants?" Augusta fixed him with a stern look. "Young man, the forest ancient isn't a bunch of plants. It's one of the most powerful magical entities in Britain, a living reservoir of primal magic that predates wandcraft itself. One who could fully command such a being could theoretically reshape the very landscape, create new magical species, even extract and repurpose the raw magical energy contained within it." Ron paled slightly. "Oh. The attack on Mr. Potter last night confirms what I've feared, Augusta continued. Blackthorn was merely a cat's paw, a disposable agent. The true power behind this attempt is someone more knowledgeable, more skilled in botanical magic. But who? Neville asked. There aren't many families that preserve that knowledge. Augusta's expression darkened. There are more than you might think, Neville. The Malfoys, for instance, though they prefer not to advertise their connection to such primitive magic. The Knots. The Carrows. Several old families maintained botanical libraries in secret, considering it a fallback should wand magic ever be restricted. Harry remembered Draco's comments with growing unease. Could Lucius Malfoy be involved directly? Possible, but I doubt he'd risk direct involvement, Augusta replied. More likely he's financing and directing someone with the necessary practical skills. Lucius prefers to keep his hands clean. Dumbledore, who had been listening thoughtfully, finally spoke. Whoever is responsible, our immediate concern must be protecting Hogwarts and its students. The boundary between the forest and the school grounds is becoming increasingly permeable to botanical intrusions. We need a solution. I can help stabilize the ancient, Harry volunteered. Now that I know what to expect, I can be more careful about the connection. No, Augusta said firmly. Attempting that again would be extremely dangerous. Whoever attacked you last night will be waiting for another attempt. They could cause permanent damage to your mind. Then what can we do? Harry asked, frustrated. We establish a protective boundary, Augusta explained. A counternetwork of plants loyal to you, Mr. Potter. Plants that can resist the ancients' influence because they're bound directly to your will. But I don't want to control plants, Harry protested. That's what Blackthorn was trying to do, what the Thorn Circle wants. There's a difference between domination and alliance, Augusta corrected gently. I'm not suggesting you force plants to obey you against their nature. I'm suggesting you create willing partnerships with specific magical plants that can form a protective barrier around the school. Like magical guardians, Neville suggested, his eyes lighting up with understanding. Plants that choose to help. Exactly, his grandmother agreed with approval. Starting with the Whomping Willow, which has already chosen you, Mr. Potter. From there, we can establish connections with other sentinel plants strategically placed around the grounds. How do we do that? Harry asked, intrigued despite his reservations. Augusta smiled, and for the first time, Harry could see the resemblance to Neville in her face. That, young man, is what I'm here to teach you. The training began immediately. Augusta Longbottom transformed one of the smaller greenhouses into a specialized workspace, filling it with plants Harry had never seen before, specimens she had brought from her own extensive gardens. These are sentinel species, she explained as Harry, Neville, Ron and Hermione gathered around her. Magical plants specifically bred for protection and boundaries. They're rare now, most wizards prefer charm-based wards, but far more effective against botanical threats. Harry examined the plants with fascination. Unlike the decorative or ingredient-focused plants in Professor Sprout's greenhouses, these had an unmistakable purpose in their very structure. Thorny vines with leaves like shields. Flowers whose petals resembled watchful eyes. Roots that extended in perfect defensive formations. They're beautiful, Harry said, reaching out to a particularly striking specimen, a silvery blue plant whose stem was wrapped in what looked like living armor. Guardian's Mantle, Augusta identified it. One of the most powerful protective plants ever cultivated. It forms symbiotic bonds with magical locations, creating a living shield against intrusion. Through his botanical awareness, Harry could sense the plant's purpose, its innate desire to protect, to stand guard. Unlike ordinary plants focused solely on growth and reproduction, this one had been magically bred over generations to serve a specific function. Your bond with the Whomping Willow gives you a foundation, Augusta continued, but to create a true protective network, you'll need to establish connections with multiple sentinel plants, each placed strategically around Hogwarts' perimeter. How do I connect with them? Harry asked. The willow happened by accident during the lightning storm. That initial bond was indeed accidental, Augusta acknowledged, but now that your botanomancer abilities are awakened, you can form new connections deliberately. It requires focus, magical energy, and genuine respect for the plant's nature. Under Augusta's guidance, Harry spent the next several hours learning to attune himself to the sentinel plants. It was different from his general awareness of plant life, more focused, more intentional. He wasn't just sensing their needs but actively seeking partnership. The Guardian's mantle responded most strongly to his efforts. As Harry focused his awareness on it, he could feel its consciousness reaching back toward his, curious, evaluating, considering. It's deciding whether to accept me, Harry realized aloud. Yes, Augusta confirmed. Sentinel plants choose their wizards as much as wizards choose them. They won't bond with someone whose intentions don't align with their purpose. Harry concentrated on projecting his honest intentions, protection, defense, the desire to prevent harm rather than to gain power. The Guardian's mantle's consciousness brightened in response, its silvery blue leaves turning toward him like faces. I think it's working, Neville whispered excitedly. The plant suddenly extended a tendril toward Harry's outstretched hand. When it touched his skin, a sensation of cool energy flowed between them, not the overwhelming rush of his willow bond, but a deliberate, controlled connection. Protector, came the impression from the plant, not a word exactly, but a concept, a recognition of shared purpose. It accepted me, Harry said, amazed at the clarity of the connection. Augusta nodded approvingly. Well done, Mr. Potter. The Guardian's mantle will form the cornerstone of our protective network. Now we must prepare it and the other sentinels for placement around the grounds. By evening, Harry had successfully formed connections with 7 different sentinel plants, each with unique defensive properties. The process became easier with practice, though it drained his magical energy considerably. That's enough for today, Augusta finally announced, noting Harry's fatigue. Tomorrow we'll begin placing them at key points around the castle. As they left the greenhouse, Hermione pulled Harry aside while Neville continued discussing technicalities with his grandmother. Harry, have you noticed something odd about all this? She asked in a low voice. Odd how? Besides the fact that I'm suddenly bonding with magical plants to fight an ancient forest entity? Augusta Longbottom knows an awful lot about this situation, Hermione said carefully. She arrived with these rare sentinel plants already prepared, as if she'd been expecting something like this to happen. Harry frowned. You think she's involved somehow? Not maliciously, Hermione clarified quickly. But she seems to have been monitoring the Thorn Circle for years. I wonder if she knew something was brewing even before Blackthorn made his move. Harry considered this. I'll ask her tomorrow. She's been straightforward so far, I don't think she's hiding anything from us. Just be careful, Hermione advised. This whole situation is connected to magical traditions and conflicts that go back centuries. We're just starting to understand what we've stumbled into. That night, Harry dreamed of forests and roots and ancient, patient awareness. In his dream, he walked through the forbidden forest, but it was different, older, wilder, filled with plants he'd never seen before. The forest ancient's consciousness surrounded him, but instead of the chaotic, agitated presence he'd sensed recently, it was calm, purposeful, almost mentoring. You seek balance, it communicated. This is good. But others seek domination. They will not stop. Who are they? Harry asked in the dream. What do they want? Instead of answering directly, the ancient showed him images, a circle of robed figures around an enormous tree, their wands channeling dark energy into its trunk. The tree absorbed the magic but suffered for it, its natural processes warped and distorted. In the center of the circle stood a figure with a familiar silver-topped cane. They believe plants exist to serve wizards, the ancient conveyed. They forget that all magic flows from the same source. Plant, wizard, creature, all connected. To dominate one is to unbalance all. How do I stop them? Harry asked. Not alone, came the response. The network is key. As they build theirs, you must build yours. But beware, they know you now. They will target what you value. The dream shifted, showing Hogwarts Castle surrounded by writhing, aggressive plants, vines cracking stone, roots undermining foundations, poisonous spores filling corridors. Students fled in panic as the botanical invasion overwhelmed the school's defenses. "I won't let that happen," Harry promised. The ancient's presence seemed to nod in approval. "Then learn quickly, Botanomancer. The old balance is broken. A new one must be found." Harry woke with the first light of dawn, the dream vivid in his mind. It hadn't felt like an ordinary dream but like a genuine communication, the ancient reaching out to him while his conscious defenses were lowered. He dressed quickly and headed down to the common room, surprised to find Neville already awake, surrounded by botanical texts. "Couldn't sleep either?" Harry asked. Neville looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "Gran had me researching historical accounts of forest ancient disturbances. There haven't been many, but when they happen, they're serious." He pushed a particularly ancient book toward Harry. "Look at this, Sussex, 1623. An awakened ancient destroyed 3 villages before a council of wizards managed to subdue it." Harry skimmed the account with growing concern. The parallels to their current situation were striking: deliberate agitation of the ancient by dark wizards, escalating botanical aggression, and eventual catastrophic loss of control. "How did they stop it?" Harry asked. "That's the troubling part," Neville replied grimly. "They had to kill it, sever the heart root of the ancient's network. It worked, but it devastated the magical ecosystem for decades afterward. Gran says it must be our absolute last resort." Harry remembered the ancient's words from his dream: a new balance must be found. Not destruction, but harmony. "We won't let it come to that," he said firmly. "The Sentinel network will help stabilize the boundary while we figure out who's behind this and stop them directly." Neville nodded, though he still looked worried. "Gran says we need to work quickly. The aggression patterns are accelerating. Did you see what happened to the vegetable gardens yesterday?" "No, what happened?" "The entire pumpkin patch uprooted itself and tried to migrate into the castle. Professor Flitwick had to levitate them all back and bind them with restraining charms. And that's just the beginning, plants all over the grounds are starting to act strangely." As if to confirm Neville's warning, a commotion erupted outside the common room. They hurried out through the portrait hole to find students backing away from what had once been an ordinary decorative fern in the corridor. It had grown to 3 times its normal size overnight and was now whipping its fronds aggressively at anyone who approached. "See what I mean?" Neville said unnecessarily. Harry approached the plant cautiously, extending his awareness toward it. He could feel the ancient's influence, a pulse of aggressive energy overriding the fern's natural docility. But now that he knew what to look for, he could also sense something else, a deliberate magical signature woven into that influence, directing it specifically toward disruption inside Hogwarts. "Someone's targeting the castle deliberately," Harry said quietly to Neville. "This isn't just random spillover from the forest anymore. They're focusing the ancient's energy here, inside our walls. Can you calm it?" Neville asked, eyeing the increasingly violent fern. Harry nodded, focusing on establishing a connection with the plant. "This isn't your true nature. You're being manipulated." The fern's movement slowed slightly, its consciousness responding to Harry's gentle guidance. He could feel it struggling against the external influence, wanting to return to normal but compelled toward aggression. Drawing on his practice with the sentinel plants, Harry extended his awareness more deeply into the fern's being. There, at the root level, he could sense the foreign magic, like a barbed hook embedded in the plant's energy. Carefully, delicately, he worked to disentangle it, replacing the aggressive commands with calm reassurance. The fern gradually settled, its fronds relaxing and its size slowly returning to normal. But Harry was troubled by what he'd sensed. The foreign magic had been precisely targeted, not a general agitation but a specific reprogramming of the plant's behavior. Whoever was doing this had sophisticated knowledge of botanical manipulation. "Mr. Potter, well done," Professor McGonagall's voice came from behind them. She had arrived during his work with the fern and was watching with a mixture of concern and approval. "That's the third such incident this morning. Plants throughout the castle are behaving erratically." "It's getting worse," Harry confirmed. "And it's targeted now, someone specifically directing the influence toward disrupting Hogwarts." McGonagall's lips thinned to a tight line. "I suspected as much. The headmaster has called an emergency staff meeting. Augusta Longbottom will be attending, and I believe you should as well, Potter, given your unique perspective on this situation." The staff room was tense when Harry arrived with McGonagall. All the Hogwarts professors were present, along with Augusta Longbottom, who nodded curtly to Harry. "Ah, Potter, thank you for joining us," Dumbledore said from the head of the table. "I've just been updating the staff on our botanical situation." "Situation?" Professor Snape's voice dripped with disdain. "I believe crisis would be more accurate, Headmaster. My potion stores have been completely compromised. Ingredients that should be inert are growing, moving, and in some cases, attempting to combine themselves into unauthorized mixtures. The library books with plant-based parchment are rearranging themselves," Madame Pants added, looking personally offended. "And the wooden shelves are sprouting leaves." Similar reports came from around the table, Professor Flitwick describing animated flower arrangements attacking during Charms class, Madame Hooch reporting that the Quidditch pitch was being overtaken by rapidly growing grass that entangled brooms in mid-flight. "It appears we face a coordinated botanical assault on Hogwarts itself," Dumbledore summarized once everyone had spoken. "Pomona, your assessment?" Professor Sprout looked exhausted, soil smudging her robes and scratches visible on her hands. "The greenhouses are in chaos. Plants that have coexisted peacefully for decades are now aggressive, overgrown, or dying from excess magical stimulation. I've sealed the more dangerous specimens, but many are beyond conventional containment." "And the source remains the forest ancient?" Dumbledore asked, turning to Harry. Harry nodded. "Yes, but it's being manipulated. In fact," he hesitated, then decided to share his dream, "I think the ancient itself tried to warn me. It reached out while I was sleeping, showed me that someone is deliberately channeling its energy toward Hogwarts." "A forest ancient communicating directly?" Augusta Longbottom looked startled. "That's unprecedented in modern times." "Because it's desperate," Harry explained. "Whatever these people are doing is hurting it as much as it's hurting us. It doesn't want this any more than we do. Then our best course of action is to proceed with the Sentinel network as quickly as possible," Augusta said decisively. "We've prepared the plants, now we need to position them at key points around the castle and grounds. Can these sentinels truly withstand the ancients' influence?" Snape asked skeptically. "They won't have to withstand it alone," Harry replied. "I'll be connecting them to the Whomping Willow, creating a unified protective network linked directly to me. Together, they can filter the ancients' energy, blocking the manipulated commands while allowing natural plant processes to continue." Several of the professors looked doubtful, but Dumbledore nodded encouragingly. "An elegant solution that seeks balance rather than suppression. When can this network be established?" "We should begin immediately," Augusta said. "The interference is clearly escalating. I suggest we divide into teams to place and activate the sentinels simultaneously, maximum coverage in minimum time." The meeting broke up with assigned tasks for everyone. Harry found himself partnered with Professor Sprout and Neville, responsible for placing the Guardian's mantle at the most critical junction, the main approach from the Forbidden Forest to the castle. As they prepared to leave, Snape pulled Harry aside, his expression even more severe than usual. "Potter, much as it pains me to say this, your botanical affinity may be our best defense against this threat." His voice lowered. "But be aware, the Dark Lord had connections to many old magical traditions, including the Thorn Circle. This attack may have deeper significance than mere plant manipulation." Harry stared at him, taken aback by both the warning and the fact that Snape was bothering to give it to him. You think Voldemort might be connected to this somehow? Snape flinched at the name but didn't rebuke Harry for using it. I think nothing happens in the wizarding world without ripples in unexpected places. Be vigilant, Potter. This is not merely an academic exercise in rare magic. With that cryptic warning, he swept away, leaving Harry troubled. If Voldemort was somehow connected to the Thorn Circle, this situation was even more dangerous than he'd thought. Planting the sentinels proved more challenging than anticipated. The grounds themselves seemed to resist their efforts, with soil becoming unusually hard or suddenly marshy, and existing plants reacting defensively as they approached with the newcomers. The Ancient is protecting its territory, Professor Sprout explained as they struggled to dig a suitable hole for the Guardian's mantle near the edge of the forest. It senses our intentions and is responding instinctively. Harry knelt and placed his hands on the ground, closing his eyes to focus. We're not here to harm you, he projected toward the general plant network. These sentinels will help stabilize your energy, protect you from those who are manipulating you. The soil gradually softened, though Harry could still sense resistance and suspicion from the surrounding plant life. It's wary, he explained to the others. It's been hurt and manipulated, it doesn't trust easily now. Can you show it? Neville suggested. Not just tell it, let it sense your intentions directly. Harry nodded, seeing the wisdom in this approach. He deepened his connection, opening his mind to allow the Ancient to perceive his genuine desire for balance and protection. It was risky, making himself vulnerable to another mental attack, but necessary to gain trust. The response was immediate and powerful, a surge of awareness flowing through the ground into him. Unlike the chaotic energy he'd encountered before, this was focused, evaluative. The Ancient was scrutinizing him, judging his sincerity. After what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds, the resistance in the surrounding plants eased. The soil became workable, and nearby plants shifted slightly to make room for the new sentinel. It's accepting our help, Harry said, opening his eyes. At least partially. They quickly positioned the Guardian's mantle in its prepared spot. The plant immediately extended its roots deep into the soil, establishing itself with unnatural speed. Its silvery blue leaves unfurled fully, oriented toward the forest like watchful eyes. Harry placed both hands on its armored stem, activating their pre-established connection. Guardian, join the network. Protect Hogwarts. Filter the Ancient's energy, block manipulation, preserve balance. The sentinel plant pulsed with magical energy as it integrated into its new role. Harry could feel it extending its awareness outward in two directions, toward the forest to monitor the Ancient's influence, and toward the Whomping Willow to establish its place in the defensive network. It's working, Professor Sprout said, watching the plant with professional admiration. Look how it's already processing the magical energy flowing from the forest, purifying it, stabilizing it. Indeed, the air around the Guardian's mantle seemed clearer somehow, as if a haze Harry hadn't even noticed was being filtered away. The nearby plants, which had been slightly overgrown and agitated, were settling back into their natural patterns. 1 down, 6 to go, Neville said, checking his map of the planned network. The others should be placing their sentinels now too. As they moved to their next location, Harry felt a sudden spike of awareness from the Guardian they'd just placed, an alarm, a warning. He spun around just in time to see a dark tendril of energy seeping from the forest edge, snaking toward their sentinel plant. Something's attacking it, he shouted, running back toward the Guardian's mantle. The plant was already responding, its armored leaves closing protectively around its central stem as it repelled the dark energy. But the attacking force was persistent, probing for weaknesses in the Guardian's defenses. Harry reached the plant and placed his hands on it, reinforcing its resistance. Through their connection, he could sense the nature of the attack, targeted, precise magical energy designed specifically to corrupt sentinel plants. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were trying to do and was already countering their efforts. With Harry's added strength, the Guardian successfully repelled the attack. The dark energy dissipated, retreating back toward the forest. But the message was clear: their opponents were watching, responding, and skilled in botanical warfare. "They know what we're doing," Harry said grimly as Professor Sprout and Neville caught up to him. They recognized the sentinel immediately. "Then we must work faster," Professor Sprout decided. "If they're targeting individual sentinels, our best defense is to complete the entire network as quickly as possible. Once connected, the plants can defend each other." They hurried to place the remaining sentinels, each time facing resistance both from the confused ancients' influence and from direct magical attacks targeting the new plants. Harry found himself constantly reinforcing connections, encouraging the sentinels, and repelling dark botanical energy. By late afternoon, all 7 sentinels were in place, forming a protective perimeter around the most vulnerable approaches to the castle. But they remained separate units, effective in their immediate vicinities but not yet a unified network. "Now comes the challenging part," Augusta Longbottom said as all the teams regrouped near the Whomping Willow. "Mr. Potter must connect all sentinels through the willow, creating a single integrated defense system." Harry nodded, though fatigue was setting in after hours of intensive botanical magic. "I'm ready." Augusta gave him a shrewd look. "This will drain your energy significantly. Are you certain you don't need rest first?" "There's no time," Harry replied, thinking of the escalating attacks on the sentinels. "If we wait, they might corrupt the plants we've already placed." "Very well," Augusta conceded. "But you'll need support. Neville will assist with botanical knowledge, and," she glanced around at the gathered professors, "I suggest someone with strong magical reserves to help anchor Mr. Potter's consciousness during the connection process." "I'll do it," came a familiar voice. Harry turned to see Hermione and Ron hurrying across the lawn toward them. "I've been researching anchoring spells all afternoon," Hermione continued breathlessly. "Miss Granger," McGonagall began doubtfully, "this is extremely advanced magic, let her try." "Minerva," Dumbledore interrupted gently. "Miss Granger has proven herself quite capable of mastering advanced magic when motivated." With the matter decided, they gathered around the Whomping Willow, which had remained unusually calm throughout the day's activities, as if aware of its critical role in their plans. Harry positioned himself at the base of the trunk, with Hermione kneeling beside him and Neville standing ready with specific botanical instructions. The other professors formed a protective circle around them, wands at the ready in case of attack. "You'll need to establish a deep connection with the willow first," Augusta instructed. "Then extend that connection to each sentinel in sequence, creating paths for energy to flow between them." Harry nodded, closing his eyes and placing both hands against the willow's massive trunk. The connection formed immediately, stronger than ever before. The willow's consciousness welcomed him, ready and eager to help. "We need to create a network," Harry communicated. "Connect to the sentinels, filter the ancients' influence, protect Hogwarts." The willow's understanding flowed back to him. It had been observing their work all day, already had awareness of the sentinels' positions. It was ready. "Now, Hermione," Harry murmured. He felt Hermione's hand on his shoulder and heard her begin a complex incantation, a spell to anchor his consciousness, preventing it from being overwhelmed or lost as it extended through the network. Her magic flowed into him, creating a tether that would keep him grounded no matter how far his awareness stretched. "Start with the Guardian's Mantle," Neville suggested. "It's the strongest connection you've formed." Harry focused his awareness through the willow toward the first sentinel. The Guardian's Mantle responded immediately, its consciousness reaching back toward him. Through the willow, Harry created a bridge, not physical roots but magical energy flowing between the two plants, connecting their awareness. As the connection formed, Harry could feel the Guardian's perspective, its vigilant watch over the forest edge, its filtering of the ancients' influence. He guided that energy back through the willow, completing the first segment of the network. One by one, he connected each sentinel plant, each connection becoming easier as the network grew. The plants began working together, sharing information, coordinating their filtering efforts, supporting each other against attacks. Harry's awareness expanded with each addition, stretching across the Hogwarts grounds in a web of botanical consciousness. When the final connection was made, the entire network activated as a single entity. A visible wave of energy pulsed from the Whomping Willow outward through the grounds, washing over plants affected by the ancients' manipulated influence. As it passed, plants settled, returning to their natural states. Harry gasped as the full network's awareness flooded through him, 7 sentinels plus the willow, all feeding him information simultaneously. It was overwhelming, disorienting. Too much, he managed to say. Focus on Hermione's anchor, Augusta instructed calmly. Feel the tether to your own consciousness. You don't need to process everything, just establish the flow patterns, then step back. Harry concentrated on the magical tether Hermione had created, using it to pull his awareness back to a manageable level. He wasn't meant to directly control the entire network constantly, just to establish its purpose and basic functions. Protect. Filter. Balance. He projected these core directives to the network as a whole, then gradually withdrew his direct consciousness, leaving the plants to carry out these functions semi-autonomously. As he pulled back to himself, he felt the network settling into its role, still connected to him but not requiring his constant attention. The sentinels would alert him if there were serious threats or changes, but could handle routine filtering on their own. Harry opened his eyes, exhausted but triumphant. It's working. Around them, the visible effects were immediate and dramatic. Across the Hogwarts grounds, plants that had been overgrown, aggressive, or withering suddenly returned to normal. The air itself seemed clearer, as if a haze of corrupted botanical energy had been purified. Remarkable, Professor Flitwick squeaked in amazement. Simply remarkable magic, Mr. Potter. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed, his eyes twinkling with approval. You've established not merely a defense but a healing system, one that works with the natural order rather than against it. Harry stood shakily, supported by Ron on one side and Neville on the other. His magical energy was severely depleted, but the satisfaction of seeing their plan succeed made the exhaustion worthwhile. It won't stop them completely, he cautioned. Whoever's manipulating the ancient is skilled and determined. They'll find new approaches, try to circumvent or corrupt the Sentinel network. But we've bought time and protection, McGonagall pointed out. The immediate threat to Hogwarts is contained. And now we can focus on identifying and stopping those responsible, Augusta added grimly. As if in response to her words, a massive magical backlash suddenly erupted from the direction of the forest, a surge of dark energy that slammed against the newly established Sentinel network like a tidal wave. Harry felt it through his connection, rage, frustration, and determination from whoever was controlling the ancient. They had recognized the nature of the defense and were testing its limits with brute force. The Sentinel network held, absorbing and filtering the attack, but Harry staggered under the psychic pressure. Through the chaos, he caught a fleeting impression, not from the plants but from the human consciousness directing the attack. A familiar presence, cold and calculating. Lucius Malfoy, Harry gasped as the attack subsided. I felt him, he's directly involved, not just financing from a distance. Dumbledore's expression hardened. Are you certain, Harry? Yes. I recognized his magical signature, I guess you'd call it. He was channeling the attack personally. This confirms our worst fears, Augusta said. If Lucius Malfoy is personally involved in botanical dark magic, the situation is even more serious than we thought. His resources, connections, and political influence make him far more dangerous than Blackthorn ever was. But why? Ron asked. What does Malfoy gain from all this plant chaos? Power, Dumbledore replied simply. Control of a forest ancient would give him access to primal magic that could be weaponized in ways the Ministry has no defenses against. And with current political tensions. He trailed off, looking troubled. We should inform the Ministry, McGonagall suggested. With what evidence? Snape countered. Potter's botanical impressions will hardly convince Fudge to move against Lucius Malfoy. Severus is right, Dumbledore sighed. We need more concrete proof of Lucius's involvement before we can act officially against him. So we wait for him to attack again? Harry asked incredulously. No, Augusta replied, her voice steely. We investigate. We gather evidence. And we prepare for his next move, which will certainly come soon. As they discussed next steps, Harry's attention was drawn to the forest edge where a disturbance was visible even to normal perception, trees swaying violently despite the still air. The ancient was agitated, responding to the fury of those attempting to control it. Through the Sentinel network, Harry sent calming energy toward the forest. We're working to help you. Hold on. Resist them. A faint response came back, acknowledgement, determination, but also warning. The ancient was fighting against the external control, but the struggle was wearing it down. If the manipulation continued much longer, something would break, either the ancient's resistance or its fundamental stability. Either outcome would be disastrous. Harry spent that night in the hospital wing, recovering from magical exhaustion. Despite Madame Pomfrey's insistence that he needed complete rest, his mind was too active for sleep. The Sentinel network remained connected to his consciousness, not demanding or overwhelming now that it was properly established, but present like background music. Through it, he could sense the ongoing battle at the forest's edge, the network filtering corrupted energy, the ancient struggling against external control, periodic probing attacks testing the defenses. It was a magical siege, with Hogwarts temporarily protected but the enemy still very much active. Ron and Hermione had refused to leave his side, camping out in adjacent hospital beds despite Madame Pomfrey's protests. Any change? Hermione asked, noticing Harry's distant expression as he monitored the network. They're being more strategic now, Harry replied. Testing different points, looking for weaknesses. Whoever's helping Malfoy knows a lot about Sentinel plants, they're targeting the specific frequencies each type is vulnerable to. But the network's holding? Ron pressed. For now. The plants are supporting each other, compensating for individual vulnerabilities. Harry frowned. But they're learning, adapting their attacks. They'll find a way through eventually unless we stop them at the source. Which means going into the forest, Hermione concluded grimly. Directly confronting Malfoy and whoever's working with him. Exactly. But Dumbledore's forbidden it until we have more information and a proper plan. A soft knock at the hospital wing door interrupted their conversation. To their surprise, Draco Malfoy slipped inside, looking uncharacteristically nervous. What do you want, Malfoy? Ron demanded, immediately suspicious. Draco's usual sneer was absent, replaced by an expression of genuine concern. I need to talk to Potter. Alone. Not happening, Ron replied flatly. It's about my father, Draco said quietly. And what's happening in the forest? That got their attention. Harry studied Draco's face, looking for signs of deception but finding only tense worry. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Ron and Hermione, Harry decided. Draco hesitated, then nodded curtly. Fine. But this conversation never happened, understand? If my father finds out I came here. He left the threat unspecified but his meaning was clear. We understand, Hermione assured him. What do you know, Draco? The use of his first name seemed to startle Malfoy, but he continued. My father isn't acting like himself. He's become obsessed with ancient plant magic over the past few months, collecting rare books, corresponding with people Mother doesn't know, disappearing for days on business trips to forests all over Europe. When did this start? Harry asked. After. Draco hesitated, after the Chamber of Secrets incident. After Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts, and the Dark Lord's diary was destroyed. The three friends exchanged significant glances. That timing couldn't be coincidental. Has your father mentioned the Thorn Circle? Hermione asked carefully. Draco's eyes widened slightly. Yes, I overheard him talking about restoring the circle to its rightful place, with someone through the floor. I didn't understand what it meant until recently. And now? Harry prompted. Now I know he's involved in whatever's happening here. Draco's voice dropped lower. 2 nights ago, he came to the manor briefly to collect some ancient botanical texts from our library. He didn't know I was home. I should have been at Quidditch practice, but I'd injured my arm. Draco rolled up his sleeve, revealing a nasty burn mark. Got this from a plant in herbology, one of those that went crazy. Anyway, Father was talking to himself, reviewing some ritual instructions. I heard him mention controlling the forest heart and using it to prepare the way. Prepare the way for what? Ron asked. Draco shook his head. He didn't say. But he was excited. In a way I've never seen before. Almost feverish. He looked directly at Harry. My father is many things, but he's always controlled, always calculating. This was different. Like he was under someone else's influence. Harry felt a chill at Draco's words. You think someone's controlling your father? Not exactly controlling, Draco clarified. More like, he's been promised something. Something he wants desperately. Enough to risk everything. The implications hung in the air between them. If Lucius Malfoy was acting under external influence, the situation was even more complex than they'd thought. Why are you telling us this? Hermione asked, the obvious question finally surfacing. Draco looked uncomfortable. Because whatever he's doing, it's dangerous. You saw what happened to that Hufflepuff girl when the plants attacked. These incidents are getting worse, and, he hesitated, and I don't think my father fully understands what he's meddling with. He's always been careful, strategic. This obsession isn't like him. The admission clearly cost Draco his pride. Harry realized how serious the situation must be for Malfoy to come to them for help. Thank you for telling us, Harry said sincerely. This could help us figure out what's really happening. Draco nodded stiffly. Just. If you stop whatever this is, try not to get my father thrown into Azkaban in the process. Mother would never recover. Without waiting for a response, he turned and slipped back out of the hospital wing as quietly as he had entered. Well, that was unexpected, Ron said after a moment of stunned silence. But informative, Hermione noted. If Lucius Malfoy is being influenced somehow, that changes our understanding of the situation. Harry was already connecting the pieces. This started after the diary was destroyed, Voldemort's diary. What if this is connected to him somehow? What if the Thorn Circle has always been connected to Voldemort? But Voldemort's gone, Ron protested. Weakened, in hiding somewhere far away. His diary had enough of his consciousness to possess Ginny, Harry reminded him. What if there are other objects, other ways he's maintaining influence? Hermione looked thoughtful. The Thorn Circle predates Voldemort by centuries. But he could have discovered them, used their ancient knowledge for his own purposes. And now someone's continuing that work, Harry concluded. Using Lucius Malfoy, using the ancient. Building towards something bigger. We need to tell Dumbledore about Draco's information, Hermione decided. Harry nodded, but before he could respond further, a sharp pulse of alarm came through his connection to the Sentinel network. One of the plants, the shielding thorn near the Quidditch pitch, was under direct attack. Something's happening, Harry said, sitting up abruptly. They're making a move against the network. He closed his eyes, focusing on the threatened Sentinel. Through their connection, he could see/feel what was happening. A dark, cloaked figure was applying some kind of potion directly to the soil around the shielding thorn. The plant was reacting violently, its defensive thorns extending but unable to reach the attacker. Without conscious thought, Harry sent his awareness fully into the network, rallying the other sentinels to support their threatened companion. Energy flowed through the connections he'd established, reinforcing the shielding thorn's resistance to the corrupting potion. Harry, what's happening? Hermione's voice seemed distant. Someone's attacking one of the sentinels directly, Harry replied, his voice strained as he maintained the connection. Not through the ancient this time, physically, with some kind of potion. I'm trying to help it resist. Through the shielding thorn's awareness, he could see the attacker more clearly, tall, cloaked, but definitely human. Not Lucius Malfoy, this figure was slighter, moving with different body language. An assistant or partner in the Thorn Circle's plans. The corrupting potion was working despite the network's resistance. The shielding thorn's natural defenses were being bypassed by whatever specialized botanical agent the attacker was using. Harry could feel the plant's pain and confusion as its very nature was being altered from the roots up. With a desperate push of energy, Harry tried to purge the corruption, but it was too firmly established. The shielding thorn was being lost, turned against the very network it had helped establish. Break the connection, Harry commanded the other sentinels. Isolate it before the corruption spreads. The network responded, severing magical links to the compromised plant. The shielding thorn's awareness flared with betrayal and confusion before it was subsumed by the dark energy, its consciousness transformed into something alien and hostile. Harry gasped as the connection broke, the psychic backlash hitting him like a physical blow. They've taken one of the sentinels, he managed to say. Corrupted it completely. The network had to cut it off. Who was it? Ron demanded. Did you see who attacked it? Harry shook his head. Not clearly. Someone in a cloak, working with botanical agents. Professional, precise, they knew exactly what they were doing. We need to alert the professors, Hermione said, already heading for the door. But Harry grabbed her arm, stopping her. Wait. There's more. Whoever did this, they left something behind. A message, carved into the earth beside the corrupted sentinel. What did it say? Ron asked. Harry's expression was grim. It said, "The heart awakens at midnight. The circle shall be restored." And it was signed with a mark, a thorn wrapped around a snake. A snake? Hermione repeated, her face paling. That confirms the Voldemort connection. And gives us a deadline, Harry added. Whatever they're planning culminates at midnight. Tonight. Chapter 3, Bloom and Thorn, absolutely not. McGonagall's voice echoed through Dumbledore's office. We cannot allow students to participate in what amounts to a confrontation with dark wizards. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood before the assembled professors, having just shared Draco's information and the warning from the corrupted sentinel. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, his expression unusually grave. With respect, Professor, Harry argued, I'm already involved. The Sentinel network is connected to me. I can sense what's happening better than anyone else. Which is precisely why you should remain safely in the castle, McGonagall countered. Your connection provides intelligence without requiring your physical presence. Augusta Longbottom cleared her throat. Unfortunately, Minerva, that's not entirely accurate. All eyes turned to her. The network's effectiveness diminishes with distance from Mr. Potter. If we intend to counter whatever ritual the Thorn Circle is planning, his presence will be necessary. Then we delay, Snape suggested coldly. Alert the Ministry, request Auror support, and properly prepare a response. By which time the ritual will be complete, Harry said, frustration building. Whatever they're planning happens at midnight. That's less than 6 hours from now. Dumbledore, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. I fear Harry is correct about the timing. The midnight alignment is significant in botanical rituals, particularly those involving ancient entities. We cannot afford to wait. Then what do you suggest, Albus? McGonagall demanded. We cannot simply march into the Forbidden Forest to confront Lucius Malfoy and his associates with only a handful of teachers and 3 underage wizards. Not march, no, Dumbledore agreed. But a carefully planned intervention might succeed where a direct confrontation would fail. He turned to Augusta. What would be required to stabilize the ancient? Not to destroy it, but to help it resist external control. Augusta considered for a moment. Traditional botanical balancing would require a counter-ritual, one focused on harmony rather than domination. We would need specific magical plants, prepared in precise ways, positioned at key points around the ancient's heartroot. A ritual of our own, Hermione realized. Exactly, Augusta confirmed. One that works with the ancient's true nature rather than against it. And these specific plants, Dumbledore asked, do we have them available? Augusta frowned. Some. The rarer specimens would be difficult to obtain on such short notice. Unless we already know where they are, Neville said quietly from where he'd been sitting near the wall. All heads turned toward him in surprise. The Forbidden Forest contains most of the plants we'd need. I've been mapping rare botanical specimens there for my personal research all year. Mr. Longbottom, Professor Sprout said with undisguised pride, you continue to surprise me with your initiative. Neville blushed but continued. I have detailed locations for at least 4 of the species we'd need. Moongleam orchids near the western stream, heartroot fungi in the old oak grove, philosopher's ivy along the stone ridges, and whispering reed beds near the central marsh. Augusta looked at her grandson with newfound respect. That would cover the primary components. We would still need binding briar and calm lotus, but those could be sourced from the greenhouses. Then it seems we have the beginnings of a plan, Dumbledore said. A small team enters the forest to gather these rare components while others prepare the ritual framework. Once everything is in place, we attempt to stabilize the ancient before the Thorn Circle completes their midnight ritual. And who constitutes this small team? McGonagall asked skeptically. Those with the necessary knowledge to identify these rare specimens, Dumbledore replied. Professor Sprout, certainly. Mr. Longbottom, as he knows the locations. And Harry, whose botanical connection will be vital for safely collecting plants from an increasingly hostile forest. I'm going wherever Harry goes, Ron stated flatly. As am I, Hermione added. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled slightly despite the seriousness of the situation. I would expect nothing less from either of you. However, this expedition must be led by adults. Professor Sprout and Augusta will accompany you, with additional protection from. I will go, Snape volunteered unexpectedly. When everyone looked at him in surprise, he added sourly, I have extensive experience with both the Forbidden Forest and Mr. Malfoy's methods. My presence may prove useful. Harry couldn't hide his shock at Snape volunteering to help, but kept his mouth shut. They needed all the assistance they could get. Very well, Dumbledore agreed. While this team collects the necessary components, the rest of us will prepare the ritual site and strengthen the castle's defenses. We must assume the Thorn Circle may attempt to create diversions or launch direct attacks on Hogwarts itself. We're really doing this, Ron murmured to Harry as the professors began discussing specific preparations. Sneaking into the Forbidden Forest at night to stop a dark wizard ritual. Again. At least this time we have professors with us, Harry pointed out. And a clearer idea of what we're facing, Hermione added, though she looked no less anxious. Preparations moved with surprising efficiency. While Harry, Neville, and the others would enter the forest, McGonagall organized the remaining staff to secure the castle. Flitwick began enhancing the structural wards, particularly around entrances where plant life might be used to breach defenses. Hagrid took charge of moving vulnerable younger students to the most secure areas of the castle. Meanwhile, Augusta and Professor Sprout converted Greenhouse 1 into a ritual preparation space. They worked with precise, practiced movements, setting up specialized equipment Harry had never seen before, crystal vessels for plant essences, silver tools for ritual harvesting, bronze bowls inscribed with ancient botanical symbols. The preparation is as important as the collection, Augusta explained as she demonstrated the proper handling technique for the sensitive magical plants they would soon gather. Each specimen must be harvested with specific intent, maintaining its magical properties through the transition. Harry absorbed everything, his connection to plants making the instructions resonate on a deeper level. He could feel the purpose behind each ritual tool, understanding intuitively why silver wouldn't touch certain specimens while bronze was essential for others. As evening approached, final preparations were made for the forest expedition. They would travel in 2 groups, Snape leading Hermione and Ron to collect heartroot fungi and philosopher's ivy, while Professor Sprout would guide Harry and Neville to the locations of the moongleam orchids and whispering reeds. "Stay connected through these," Augusta said, distributing small seed pods to each person. "Messenger beans, squeeze one, and its twin will warn," alerting the carrier. 3 squeezes signals immediate danger and need for assistance. Harry tucked his messenger bean into his pocket alongside his wand. He had left the silencing sycamore seed behind, knowing he would need his full botanical awareness in the forest. The sentinel network hummed at the edge of his consciousness, weaker now with one plant corrupted but still functioning. As they prepared to leave, Dumbledore pulled Harry aside. "Harry, I must caution you about one thing. The forest ancient's influence will be significantly stronger as you approach its heart. Your connection to plants makes you particularly vulnerable to being overwhelmed by its consciousness." "I've connected with it before," Harry pointed out. "Briefly, and from a distance," Dumbledore corrected. "Deeper in its territory, surrounded by its network, the experience will be far more intense. You must maintain your sense of self, your own purpose." His blue eyes were unusually serious. "The ancient is neither good nor evil, it simply is. But in its current agitated state, it could subsume your consciousness without malicious intent, simply by its vastness." Harry swallowed, suddenly more nervous. "I understand, Professor. Remember your anchor," Dumbledore advised. "Focus on what makes you Harry, your friends, your purpose, your choices. That identity is your protection against being lost in the ancient's awareness." With this sobering advice, they set out as twilight descended over Hogwarts. The forest loomed before them, darker and more threatening than Harry had ever seen it. Even from the edge, he could feel the chaotic energy emanating from within, plants pulsing with unnatural vitality, confused and agitated. Professor Sprout led their group along the western boundary, following Neville's carefully marked map. Harry walked between them, his senses extended, monitoring the surrounding plant life for threats. Everything felt wrong, ordinary forest plants vibrating with excess energy, their normal patterns disrupted by the ancient's influence. "The orchids should be just ahead," Neville whispered, pointing to a small stream glimmering faintly in the gathering darkness. "They grow along the water's edge, under the silver birches." They approached cautiously. The stream looked normal at first glance, but Harry immediately sensed the disturbance. The water plants were overgrown, choking the natural flow, while the surrounding trees bent unnaturally, their branches dipping into the water as if drinking directly. "They've been affected," Harry murmured. "Everything here is being pushed toward excessive growth and consumption. Can you calm them enough for us to approach?" Professor Sprout asked. Harry nodded, kneeling at the stream's edge and placing his hands on the damp soil. He closed his eyes, extending his awareness into the tangled plant network around the stream. The confusion was immediate, simple plant minds pushed beyond their natural limits, consuming more nutrients and water than they needed, growing without purpose or restraint. "Ease," Harry projected gently. "Return to balance. We mean no harm." The plants responded sluggishly, their patterns too disrupted for immediate correction. But Harry persisted, carefully disentangling the foreign energy from their natural processes. Gradually, the frantic growth slowed. The trees straightened, lifting their branches from the water. The choking water plants relaxed their stranglehold on the stream. "There," Harry said, opening his eyes. "It's temporary, but they should remain calm while we collect what we need." Neville moved forward, scanning the stream bank with expert eyes. "There," he exclaimed softly, pointing to clusters of ethereal white flowers glowing with faint blue luminescence in the shadows beneath the birch trees. "Moongleam orchids, perfectly mature specimens." Professor Sprout approached with silver shears in hand. "Remember, Mr. Longbottom, cut at the secondary stem, not the primary." We need the root ball intact for the ritual. Harry watched as they carefully harvested 7 orchid clusters, each one gently placed in a crystal container filled with a preservation solution. Through his botanical awareness, he could feel the orchid's response, not pain, exactly, but a shift in energy as they were separated from their natural environment. He instinctively reached out to soothe them, easing their transition. They're accepting the change, he observed, surprised by how clearly he could sense the plant's reactions. They understand they're being repurposed. Magical plants have deeper awareness than most wizards recognize, Professor Sprout explained. Particularly rare specimens like these. Their magic gives them a form of, not intelligence as we understand it, but purpose recognition. With the orchid safely collected, they moved deeper into the forest, following Neville's map toward the reed beds. The farther they went, the stronger the ancients' influence became. Trees creaked and swayed without wind. Vines slithered across their path like serpents. Mushrooms erupted from the soil, growing visibly before their eyes. Harry's head began to pound with the effort of filtering the overwhelming botanical input. Everywhere around them, plants were crying out in confusion, their natural processes disrupted by the foreign energy flowing through the ancients' network. Harry? Neville's concerned voice cut through his distraction. Are you all right? It's getting stronger, Harry managed, pressing his palm against his forehead. The ancients' influence, it's like static, making it hard to think clearly. Professor Sprout looked worried. Perhaps we should turn back, send someone else. No, Harry interrupted firmly. I can manage it. Just, give me a moment. He closed his eyes, focusing on Dumbledore's advice. I am Harry Potter. I have friends who need me. I have a purpose here. He pictured Ron and Hermione, the Whomping Willow, the sentinel network he'd established. Gradually, the mental static receded, not gone but manageable. Better, he said, opening his eyes. Let's keep moving. The sooner we gather everything, the sooner we can help the ancient. They pressed on through increasingly chaotic forest growth. Twice they had to stop while Harry calmed aggressive plants blocking their path, a strangling vine that had developed thorns it shouldn't naturally possess, and a cluster of puffball fungi launching spore clouds at any movement. Finally, they reached the central marsh, or what should have been a marsh. The once wet ground had been transformed into a tangled mass of overgrown reeds stretching 20 feet high, their normally hollow stems bulging with excess growth. The whispering reeds, Neville said, staring up at the towering plants. They should be 3 feet tall, not 20. The excessive growth might have compromised their magical properties, Professor Sprout worried, examining the distorted plants. We need specimens that retain their proper form and essence. Harry studied the reed bed, extending his awareness into the tangled growth. Near the center, protected from the worst of the chaotic energy by the surrounding overgrowth, he sensed a small patch of reeds that had maintained something closer to their natural state. There's a protected area in the middle, he told the others. Some of the reeds there are still relatively normal. But getting to them. He eyed the dense wall of overgrown stems blocking their path. I might be able to create an opening, Harry decided, approaching the edge of the reed bed. He placed both hands against the towering stems, connecting with their distorted consciousness. These plants were further gone than the others they'd encountered, almost drunk on excess energy, their simple awareness stretched and twisted. Path, Harry commanded more firmly than he'd done with other plants. Create passage. The reeds resisted, their unnatural growth patterns difficult to redirect. Harry pushed harder, drawing on his connection to the Sentinel network for strength. Part. Allow us through. With creaking reluctance, the massive reeds began to bend away from each other, creating a narrow corridor through their midst. Harry maintained the connection, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of controlling plants so thoroughly influenced by the ancients' disrupted energy. Quickly, he managed through gritted teeth. I don't know how long I can hold them. Professor Sprout and Neville hurried through the opening, Harry following while maintaining his control over the surrounding reeds. The passage closed behind them as his influence weakened, the plants snapping back to their chaotic growth patterns. In the center, they found what they sought, a small clearing where the reeds had maintained something closer to their natural size and form. Even these were affected, swaying and whispering among themselves with more animation than normal, but their magical properties remained largely intact. Perfect, Professor Sprout breathed, removing specialized crystal cutting tools. These will serve our purpose. As they carefully harvested the necessary specimens, Harry's awareness suddenly sharpened, focusing on something beyond the reed bed. A pulse of directed energy, different from the ancients' chaotic influence, purposeful, ritualistic. Someone's performing magic nearby, he warned, turning toward the sensation. Plant-based magic, powerful. Professor Sprout looked up from her work, alarmed. How close? Harry concentrated, trying to pinpoint the source. Not far. Maybe a few hundred yards that way. He pointed deeper into the forest. Toward the center. The heart root, Neville realized. They must be beginning their ritual early. We need to finish here and rendezvous with the others, Professor Sprout decided. Quickly now. They completed the reed harvest with increased urgency. As Professor Sprout sealed the last specimen container, Harry felt a spike in the external energy, a surge of power flowing through the plant network around them. The effect was immediate and alarming. The overgrown reeds began thrashing violently, their movements no longer random but coordinated, closing in around the clearing where they stood. They know we're here, Harry gasped, the realization hitting him along with another wave of directed botanical energy. Whoever's performing the ritual, they've sensed us and they're using the plants to trap us. Can you counter it? Professor Sprout asked urgently, clutching the precious harvested specimens. Harry tried to reconnect with the reeds, to calm their sudden aggression, but met solid resistance. The external influence was too strong, too focused compared to his more gentle approach. I can't override it directly, he admitted. But maybe. He knelt, placing both hands on the ground and shifting his approach. Instead of trying to control the reeds, he reached deeper, connecting with the soil beneath them, the mycelia networks running through the earth. These simpler organisms were less affected by the chaotic energy, more responsive to Harry's influence. Through them, he created a ripple effect, disturbing the reeds' connection to the ground, weakening their aggressive coordination. Now, he shouted as the reeds momentarily faltered. Run for the edge. I'll try to clear a path. They sprinted through the swaying reeds, Harry focusing all his energy on disrupting the ground-level connections just enough to create momentary openings. Plant matter whipped at them from all sides as the external control reasserted itself, but they managed to break through to the forest beyond the reed bed. Which way? Neville gasped, clutching a stitch in his side. Harry pointed. Back the way we came. We need to meet the others at the rendezvous point. As they hurried through the forest, dodging increasingly animated plant life, Harry reached for the messenger bean in his pocket. 3 quick squeezes, the danger signal. They needed to warn Snape's group that their presence had been detected. The bean warmed almost immediately with a return signal. 3 squeezes. The other group had encountered trouble too. We need to move faster, Harry urged, sensing pursuit behind them, not human followers but plant movement, coordinated and purposeful. The forest itself was being turned against them. They'd covered perhaps half the distance to the rendezvous point when a massive wall of vegetation erupted from the ground ahead, blocking their path completely. Thorny vines interwoven with fungal growths and distorted tree branches created an impenetrable barrier stretching in both directions as far as they could see. They've cut us off, Professor Sprout realized, her normally cheerful face grim. Trying to herd us deeper into the forest, away from Hogwarts. Harry studied the barrier, seeking weaknesses. The construction was complex, multiple plant species working in unnatural coordination, their growth patterns overridden by external magical control. Breaking through would require more than gentle persuasion. I need to try something different, he decided. Something more assertive. Drawing on what he'd learned about plant energies over the past days, Harry focused on the fundamental weakness of forced coordination. Plants controlled against their nature retained an underlying resistance, a tension that could be exploited. He stretched out his hands toward the barrier and pushed his awareness into its structure, not with gentle requests but with sharp, precise disruption. Remember your true nature. Break these false bonds. The barrier trembled as conflicting influences battled for control. Harry felt the external magic fighting back, trying to maintain its hold on the plants. He pushed harder, targeting specific junction points where different species connected, amplifying their natural incompatibilities. With a series of sharp cracks, the barrier began to splinter. Vines withdrew from fungal masses that were no longer compatible. Tree branches straightened, rejecting the unnatural postures they'd been forced into. A gap appeared, then widened as Harry maintained pressure on the weak points. There, he gasped, sweat pouring down his face from the effort. Go through quickly. Professor Sprout and Neville dashed through the opening, Harry following just as his influence began to waver. The barrier crashed back together behind them, but they were through, continuing toward the rendezvous point with renewed urgency. They broke into a small clearing just as Snape's group emerged from the opposite side. Hermione's robes were torn, and Ron had a nasty scratch across one cheek, but they were intact and, more importantly, carrying specialized containers similar to their own. You got the specimens? Harry asked immediately. Snape nodded curtly. At considerable risk. The forest is completely compromised. Plant life is being controlled with surprising precision. We experienced the same, Professor Sprout confirmed. Someone detected our presence and attempted to capture us. Not just someone, Snape replied grimly. We caught a glimpse of our opponents. Lucius Malfoy is indeed present, along with two others I recognized as former Death Eaters. But they are being directed by someone else, someone with specialized knowledge of botanical rituals. Did you see who? Harry asked urgently. No. They remained hooded, away from direct confrontation. But their control over plant life was extensive. Something in Snape's tone suggested he was genuinely impressed, which was rare enough to be concerning. We have all 4 specimens now, Hermione pointed out, indicating the containers they carried. Shouldn't we return to the castle to complete the preparation? That would be the prudent course, Professor Sprout agreed. The ritual framework should be ready by now. Harry shook his head, his expression troubled. They're accelerating their timeline. I can feel it through the plant network, the energy they're channeling into the ancient is increasing rapidly. If we leave now, go all the way back to the castle for preparation, and then return, we might be too late. What do you suggest? Snape asked, his dark eyes evaluating Harry with unusual directness. We prepare the specimens here, then proceed directly to counter-ritual positions around the Heartroot. Augusta explained the process. We can do the essential preparation with the tools we have. Neville nodded in agreement. The ritual works better with fresh specimens anyway. Traditional botanical magic often happened in the field, not in prepared laboratories. The adults exchanged glances, weighing the risks against Harry's certainty about the accelerating timeline. Very well, Snape decided unexpectedly. But we proceed with extreme caution. If Lucius and his associates are already at the Heartroot, we will be at a significant disadvantage. They quickly created a makeshift preparation area in the clearing, using fallen logs as work surfaces. Professor Sprout and Neville demonstrated the essential extraction techniques for each specimen, carefully drawing out their magical essences and combining them in specific sequences. Harry assisted, his botanical awareness making him unusually sensitive to the proper handling methods. He could feel each plant's unique magical signature, understanding instinctively how they would interact when combined. You have a natural talent for this, Professor Sprout observed as Harry perfectly extracted the delicate essence from a moongleam orchid. Most wizards require years of training to develop such touch. It feels obvious, Harry admitted. Like I can see how the energies want to flow and just help them along. As they worked, Hermione kept watch, wand at the ready. Ron assisted with the practical aspects of preparation, following Neville's detailed instructions with surprising precision. "Snape's actually impressed with you," he whispered to Harry during a brief moment alone. "Saw his face when you knew exactly how to handle that tricky fungi. Never thought I'd see the day." Harry managed a tense smile, though most of his attention remained on the increasingly disturbing sensations coming through his botanical awareness. The ancient's energy was being channeled with growing intensity, focused towards some purpose he couldn't quite discern. And beneath the external manipulation, he sensed the ancient's own distress, a fundamental strain on its very existence as its natural patterns were forcibly overridden. Finally, they completed the essential preparations. 7 crystal vials glowed with combined botanical essences, each tuned to a specific aspect of restoration and balance. "These must be placed at precise points around the heart root," Professor Sprout explained, carefully packing the vials in a protective case. "Once activated, they'll create a harmonizing field that should help the ancient resist external control and begin returning to its natural patterns." "Assuming we can get close enough to position them," Snape added dryly. "The heart root will undoubtedly be the focus of Lucius's ritual and heavily protected." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the ancient's presence. Despite the chaotic energy and external manipulation, he could still sense its fundamental awareness, confused, distressed, but recognizable. "We're coming to help," he projected carefully, trying to avoid detection by whoever was manipulating the ancient. "Guide us. Show us safe approach." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a whisper through leaves, Harry felt a response, faint impressions of pathways, of areas less heavily monitored, of approaches that might succeed where direct routes would fail. "I think the ancient is trying to help us," he said, opening his eyes. "It's showing me alternate paths to the heart root, ways that might avoid detection." Snape looked skeptical, but Professor Sprout nodded in understanding. "The ancient is not inherently malicious. If it recognizes our intent to restore balance rather than establish control, it would naturally attempt to assist." "Then let's follow Potter's botanical instincts," Snape decided, his tone making it unclear whether he was being sarcastic or sincere. "Lead on." Harry guided them through increasingly dense forest, following the subtle cues he was receiving. The paths were not obvious, sometimes requiring them to squeeze between tightly grown trees or duck under low-hanging branches, but they consistently avoided areas of heavily manipulated plant life. The deeper they went, the more intense the ancient's presence became. Harry's head throbbed with the effort of maintaining his own identity amidst the growing flood of botanical awareness. Dumbledore's warning echoed in his mind, about the danger of being overwhelmed by the ancient's consciousness. "I am Harry Potter," he reminded himself repeatedly. "I have friends. I have purpose. I am not the forest." After nearly an hour of careful navigation, they reached the edge of a large clearing. Harry signaled for everyone to stop, crouching low behind a fallen log. Before them, bathed in eerie green-blue light, was the heart root of the forest ancient. It was larger and more impressive than Harry had imagined, a massive, gnarled structure rising 15 feet from the forest floor, its surface inscribed with natural patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Around its base, smaller roots radiated outward like spokes of a wheel, disappearing into the surrounding forest. But the natural wonder of the heart root was marred by what surrounded it. A circle of robed figures stood at measured intervals around the structure, each positioned on one of the radiating roots. At their center, directly before the heart root, stood 3 figures Harry recognized immediately: Lucius Malfoy, his platinum hair unmistakable even at a distance, flanked by 2 burly Death Eaters whose names Harry couldn't recall. And there, emerging from behind the heart root, was a figure Harry had hoped never to see again, Professor Blackthorn, somehow freed from custody. "Blackthorn," Harry whispered in shock. "He's escaped." "Impossible," Snape hissed. "He was being held in a ministry-secure facility." "Evidently not secure enough," Ron muttered. They watched as Blackthorn approached Lucius, the 2 men conferring briefly before turning back to the ritual arrangement. The circle of robed figures, 8 in total, began a slow chant, raising their wands toward the heartroot. Streams of dark energy flowed from their wands, penetrating the massive structure, causing it to pulse with unnatural light. The full thorn circle, Professor Sprout whispered in horror. I thought most of them were lost centuries ago. Apparently they were merely hiding, Snape replied grimly. And now they've reunited for whatever this ritual entails. Harry felt the impact of their magic through his botanical connection, invasive, demanding, forcing the ancient's energy to conform to external will. The heartroot shuddered under the assault, its natural patterns disrupted by the dark energy being poured into it. What exactly are they trying to do? Hermione asked, watching the disturbing scene. Control the ancient completely, Harry answered, the knowledge coming to him through his connection. Not just influence it like before, but bind it to their will permanently. Turn it into a weapon, a power source they can direct. For what purpose? Ron wondered. Power, Snape replied simply. A forest ancient fully under human control would provide magical energy beyond anything individual wizards could generate. It could reshape landscapes, create new magical species, even affect weather patterns across large areas. Or be weaponized against enemies, Professor Sprout added grimly. Plant life exists everywhere. Imagine every tree, every blade of grass turned against specific targets. The implications were chilling. Harry studied the clearing, noting the positions of the Thorn Circle members and the pattern of their ritual. To counter their magic, they would need to place their prepared botanical essences at specific points around the heartroot, which meant somehow getting past the circle of dark wizards. We need a diversion, he decided. Something to disrupt their concentration without alerting them to our true purpose. I can create a suitable distraction, Snape offered, his wand already in hand. But timing will be crucial. The moment their ritual falters, you must move quickly to position your countermeasures. They swiftly formulated a plan. Snape would create a diversion from the far side of the clearing, something dramatic enough to draw attention without immediately revealing their presence or purpose. Meanwhile, Harry, Neville, and Professor Sprout would circle around to predetermined positions, ready to dash in and place the botanical essences once the distraction was underway. Ron and Hermione would cover their approach, ready with defensive spells if they were detected. Remember, Professor Sprout cautioned as she distributed the crystal vials, each essence must be placed directly on one of the radiating roots, equidistant from the heartroot itself. The pattern must be precise for the counter-ritual to function properly. Harry nodded, carefully tucking 3 of the vials into secure pockets. Neville took 2, while Professor Sprout kept the remaining 2. They would approach from different directions, maximizing their chances of successful placement even if some were caught. Good luck, Harry whispered as they prepared to separate. Be careful. You too, mate, Ron replied, gripping Harry's shoulder briefly. Don't do anything heroically stupid. Too late for that, Harry quipped with a tense smile. They split up, moving silently through the underbrush to their designated positions. Harry circled wide around the clearing, his botanical awareness helping him avoid patches of vegetation that might give away his presence. The heartroot's pulsing energy grew stronger as he approached, filling his mind with conflicting sensations, the ancient's distress overlaid with the thorn circle's controlling magic. When he reached his first designated spot, Harry crouched in the shadows, waiting for Snape's distraction. From this vantage point, he could see Blackthorn more clearly, directing the ritual with precise gestures. Lucius Malfoy stood at what appeared to be the primary position, his wand channeling more energy than the other participants. The ritual was reaching some kind of crescendo. The heartroot's pulsing had accelerated, and the dark energy flowing into it had taken on a reddish tinge. Harry could feel the ancient's resistance weakening as the external control strengthened, like watching someone slowly losing consciousness. Just as Harry began to worry that Snape had been discovered, a massive explosion erupted on the far side of the clearing. Not magical fireworks, but something far more appropriate, a violent botanical reaction. Several trees suddenly burst apart, there were transforming into swarms of stinging insects that descended upon the ritual circle. The Thorn Circle members broke formation in surprise, swatting at the insects and casting hasty shield charms. Only Blackthorn maintained his focus, shouting at the others to resume their positions. "Now!" Harry whispered to himself, darting forward during the confusion. He reached the first radiating root, quickly placing a crystal vial against its surface. The essence inside immediately began to glow brighter, the vial adhering to the root as if magnetized. Across the clearing, he glimpsed Professor Sprout doing the same, moving with surprising agility for her stocky build. Neville was approaching from the opposite side, keeping low to avoid detection. Harry sprinted to his second position, staying in the shadows as much as possible. The Thorn Circle was regaining its composure, wizards returning to their places despite the continuing insect swarm. He needed to move faster. Placing the second vial, Harry felt an immediate resonance as it activated, connecting with the first one he'd positioned. A subtle vibration ran through the root system, the beginning of the counter-ritual taking effect. He had just started toward his final position when a shout rang out. "Intruders! By the western approach!" Harry froze, then ducked behind a massive fern as spells began flying across the clearing. Hermione and Ron had been spotted, drawing fire from several Thorn Circle members. They returned spells valiantly, creating additional chaos that might help the others complete the vial placement. Taking advantage of the distraction, Harry sprinted toward his final position. He was halfway there when a cold voice stopped him in his tracks. "Mr. Potter. How unsurprising to find you interfering yet again." Harry turned to find Lucius Malfoy standing 10 feet away, wand leveled directly at him. The man's aristocratic features were twisted in a combination of triumph and disdain. "This doesn't concern you, boy," Malfoy continued. "Though I'm not surprised Dumbledore would send children to do his work. Always hiding behind others, isn't he?" "Better than hiding behind Voldemort," Harry retorted, desperately trying to think of a way past Malfoy to place his final vial. Malfoy's face hardened. "You understand nothing of what's happening here. The power we're accessing predates your precious Dumbledore, predates even the founders of Hogwarts. The Thorn Circle is reclaiming magical heritage that rightfully belongs to true wizards. By forcing your will on something that doesn't want it?" Harry challenged, subtly shifting his position. "That's not heritage, it's just another form of bullying. Control is the essence of magic, Potter," Malfoy sneered. "Something your mudblood-loving mentors never understood. All magic is about bending forces to wizard will. The ancient is merely a greater force requiring greater control." As Malfoy spoke, Harry became aware of movement behind the man, subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in the vegetation. The ancient, despite being nearly overwhelmed by the ritual, was responding to Harry's presence, to his resistance against Malfoy. "You're wrong," Harry said, maintaining eye contact to keep Malfoy's attention. "The greatest magic comes from partnership, not domination. The ancient has its own purpose, its own magic that's been evolving for centuries. Working with it would give you more than trying to enslave it." Malfoy laughed coldly. "Childish sentimentality. The ancient is a resource, nothing more. And soon it will be the foundation of a new magical order, one that restores proper hierarchy to the wizarding world." The vegetation behind Malfoy continued its subtle movement, a tendril slowly emerging from the undergrowth. Harry kept talking, playing for time. "Is that why you're working with Blackthorn? To create some new magical weapon for Voldemort when he returns?" Malfoy's expression flickered momentarily. "Blackthorn is a tool with useful knowledge, nothing more. As for the Dark Lord..." His voice lowered. "Some powers transcend even his vision. The ancient's energy will elevate those wise enough to control it beyond anything the wizarding world has seen before." The tendril had nearly reached Malfoy's feet. Harry took a calculated risk. "Your son knows what you're doing. He's worried about you." That caught Malfoy off guard. "Draco? What nonsense is this?" "He came to me. Said you weren't acting like yourself. Said this obsession with plant magic isn't like you. Harry took a step forward. He's right, isn't he? This isn't really your plan. You're being used too, just like Blackthorn. Fury flashed across Malfoy's face. How dare you, the tendril struck, wrapping around Malfoy's ankle and yanking hard. The wizard fell backward with a surprised shout, his spell firing harmlessly into the air. Harry didn't waste the opportunity, sprinting past him toward the final vial position. Chaos had engulfed the clearing. Ron and Hermione were dueling with two Thorn Circle members, while Snape had emerged from cover to engage Blackthorn directly. Professor Sprout and Neville worked frantically to position their remaining vials amidst the fighting. Harry reached his final position, quickly pressing the vial against the radiating root. It adhered instantly, glowing brightly as it connected with the others already in place. That made 6 out of 7, they needed just one more to complete the counter-ritual pattern. Across the clearing, Harry spotted Neville pinned down by spell fire, unable to reach the final position. The last vial was clutched in his hand, useless while he remained trapped behind a large boulder. Making a split-second decision, Harry began working his way around the edge of the clearing toward Neville, using the ongoing battle as cover. Spells flashed overhead, illuminating the Heartroot which now pulsed with chaotic, conflicting energies, the Thorn Circle's dark magic battling against the balancing influence of the positioned vials. Neville! Harry called as he reached the boulder. Pass me the vial. Neville looked up in surprise, then nodded in understanding. As Harry provided covering fire with a series of shield charms, Neville tossed the final crystal vial toward him. Harry caught it one-handed, then immediately rolled away as a blasting curse shattered the boulder where they'd been hiding. The final position was across the clearing, directly opposite where Blackthorn and Snape were engaged in fierce magical combat. To reach it, Harry would have to cross directly in front of the Heartroot, exposed to everyone in the clearing. Taking a deep breath, Harry sprinted from cover. Immediately, spells began raining down around him. He dodged and weaved, relying on the confusion of the battle to protect him. A cutting curse grazed his shoulder, and a stunning spell missed his head by inches. He was halfway across when Blackthorn spotted him. The man's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in fury as he understood Harry's intent. Breaking away from his duel with Snape, Blackthorn aimed his wand directly at Harry. "Potter," he roared. "Stop!" Harry didn't slow, pushing his legs harder as Blackthorn cast a spell that tore up the ground in his path. He leapt over the disrupted earth, still clutching the precious vial. "The boy is completing a counter-ritual." Blackthorn shouted to the others. "Stop him at all costs." Multiple wands turned toward Harry, but as they did, something unexpected happened. The Heartroot itself pulsed with sudden intensity, and all the plant life in the clearing responded, vines erupting from the ground to entangle Thorn Circle members, branches swinging down to block spells aimed at Harry. The Ancient was fighting back, using what little autonomy remained to protect Harry's mission. Through his botanical connection, Harry felt its desperate effort, its understanding that the counter-ritual represented its best hope for freedom. With renewed determination, Harry sprinted the final distance to the last position. Behind him, Blackthorn broke free of the entangling vines and gave chase, his face contorted with rage. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, boy," Blackthorn shouted. "This power is beyond your comprehension." Harry reached the final root, dropping to his knees and pressing the vial firmly against its surface. As it adhered and began to glow, Blackthorn reached him, grabbing his shoulder and yanking him backward. Too late, Harry gasped, a fierce smile crossing his face. The circle is complete. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All 7 vials pulsed with synchronized light, sending waves of purifying energy along the roots toward the Heartroot. Where the dark energy of the Thorn Circle's ritual had been red-tinged and invasive, this energy glowed with golden-green light, gentle but persistent. The Heartroot shuddered, caught between opposing magical influences. For a moment, nothing seemed to change, both energies battled for dominance, neither gaining the advantage. It's not enough, Blackthorn said, his grip on Harry loosening slightly as he stared at the heartroot in confusion. Your counter-ritual should have failed. We had everything perfectly calibrated. Harry felt it too, the balance was precarious, neither side able to fully overcome the other. The counter-ritual was helping the ancient resist, but not enough to break the thorn circle's established control. It needs a catalyst, Harry realized suddenly. Something to tip the balance. Blackthorn's eyes narrowed. Yes, a living conduit. That was to be Lucius's role in the final phase. He looked at Harry with sudden calculation. But you, with your natural botanical connection, you would make a far more effective conduit. Before Harry could react, Blackthorn grabbed him by both shoulders, pushing him toward the heartroot itself. Touch it, Potter. Connect with it directly. Your affinity will strengthen whichever magical pattern you choose to support. Harry resisted, understanding the dangerous gamble Blackthorn was suggesting. Touching the heartroot directly, with both magical rituals active, would indeed create a decisive outcome, but at tremendous risk to himself. His consciousness could be overwhelmed or torn apart between the conflicting energies. But as he struggled, Harry realized Blackthorn was right about one thing: someone needed to break the stalemate, and his unique connection to plants made him the only viable option. Harry, don't! Hermione screamed from across the clearing, having fought her way closer. It's too dangerous. Making his decision, Harry stopped fighting against Blackthorn's grip. Instead, he suddenly surged forward, breaking free and lunging toward the heartroot on his own terms. If he was going to risk everything, it would be his choice, his purpose. His palms connected with the massive root structure, and the world exploded into botanical consciousness. The ancient's awareness flooded into him, centuries of growth, of patient observation, of slow communion with all plant life in the forest. Layered over this was the thorn circle's controlling magic, sharp, demanding, restructuring the ancient's natural patterns toward external purpose. And beneath both, Harry sensed something else, a deeper, more fundamental magical current that predated even the ancient itself. The raw, primal magic of the earth, flowing through all living things in endless cycles of growth and decay, creation and transformation. In that moment of connection, Harry understood what the counter-ritual had been missing. The prepared essences provided structure, but they needed the living intent of a botanomancer, someone who could channel the right energy, the right purpose into the ancient. Blackthorn had been right about Harry being a conduit, but wrong about how that power would manifest. Harry didn't need to choose between the competing ritual magics, he needed to bypass both, reaching directly for the fundamental botanical consciousness that was the ancient's true nature. Remember yourself, Harry projected, not commanding but reminding. Not what they want you to be. Not what anyone wants you to be. What you truly are. What you have always been. The ancient's consciousness stirred, recognizing the truth in Harry's words. Centuries of memories flowed between them, the slow awakening of awareness, the gradual expansion of its network through the forest, the natural cycles of dormancy and activity that had been disrupted by the thorn circle's interference. You don't need their control or our protection, Harry continued. You need balance. You need freedom to follow your own nature. As their connection deepened, Harry became aware of a choice unfolding before him, a possibility he hadn't anticipated. The ancient, in its desperation, was offering him something extraordinary, the chance to replace the thorn circle's control with his own. Not through ritual magic but through their established botanical bond. Take my network, came the impression. Guide me. Protect me from those who would dominate. The temptation was staggering. With direct control of the ancient's network, Harry would wield power beyond anything he'd imagined, the ability to direct all plant life connected to the ancient, to channel its vast magical energy, to create and transform at will. Not dark magic, not evil, but tremendous power nonetheless. For a heartbeat, Harry considered it. With such power, he could protect not just the ancient but all of Hogwarts. He could ensure no dark wizard ever threatened his friends again. He could reshape the very earth to serve life rather than destruction. But even as these possibilities unfurled before him, Harry recognized the fundamental flaw in such thinking. Control, even benevolent control, was still control. It would still bind the ancient to external will rather than its own nature. It would make Harry no different in principle from the Thorn Circle, merely different in intent. No, Harry projected firmly. I won't control you. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to help you be free. Instead of accepting the offered power, Harry channeled his energy in the opposite direction, not taking from the ancient but giving to it. He poured his own magical strength into supporting the counter-ritual's balancing effect, reinforcing the ancient's natural patterns against external influence. Remember your cycles, he encouraged. Remember your rhythms. Winter dormancy. Spring awakening. Summer growth. Autumn reflection. Remember the balance you've maintained for centuries. The heartroot pulsed with renewed vigor as the ancient responded to Harry's guidance. The golden-green energy of the counter-ritual surged, flowing through the entire root system, purging the invasive red-tinged control magic. No! Blackthorn shouted, recognizing what was happening. You fool! You could have had everything. Around the clearing, the Thorn Circle's ritual began to collapse. Their carefully positioned magical anchors destabilized as the ancient reasserted its natural patterns. Several of the robed figures were thrown backward by magical backlash, their wands flying from their hands. Lucius Malfoy, having regained his footing, stared at the unfolding scene with dawning comprehension and fury. Stop him, he commanded, pointing his wand at Harry. Kill him if necessary. But before any attack could reach Harry, a wave of protective plant life erupted around him, not controlled by him but acting in defense of the botanomancer who had chosen freedom over power. Vines, roots, branches, and flowers formed a living shield, intercepting spells and entangling would-be attackers. Through his connection with the heartroot, Harry could feel the balance shifting decisively. The ancient was reclaiming itself, its natural magic overwhelming the artificial controls that had been imposed upon it. The counter-ritual vials pulsed with final brightness, their essences fully absorbed into the root system, their purpose fulfilled. With a tremendous surge of energy, the heartroot released a shockwave of purified botanical magic that swept across the entire clearing and beyond, racing through the forest in all directions. Harry felt it like a cleansing wind, washing away the corrupted influences, restoring natural patterns throughout the ancient's network. The force of the release finally broke Harry's physical connection to the heartroot, throwing him backward several feet. He landed hard, momentarily dazed, his mind still reeling from the intense botanical communion. As his vision cleared, Harry saw the clearing transformed. The Thorn Circle members were scattered, many unconscious, others restrained by living plant matter that had wrapped around their limbs. Lucius Malfoy was pinned against a tree, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief as vines tightened around him despite his struggles. Blackthorn alone remained standing, though he no longer looked threatening. His shoulders slumped in defeat as he stared at the heartroot, which now pulsed with calm, natural light, neither the chaotic energy of before nor the forced patterns of the ritual, but something balanced and self-directed. You don't understand what you've done, Blackthorn said quietly as Harry got to his feet. What you've rejected. The power you could have wielded. I understand perfectly, Harry replied, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. I chose partnership over domination. That's always going to be the better choice. Across the clearing, his friends were regrouping. Ron supported Hermione, who appeared to have injured her leg. Neville was helping Professor Sprout to her feet, while Snape efficiently bound unconscious Thorn Circle members with magical restraints. Is everyone all right? Harry called, making his way toward them. We're fine, Ron answered. Well, mostly fine. Hermione took a nasty cutting curse to the leg, but Snape says it's not serious. The ancient? Professor Sprout asked urgently. Has it stabilized? Harry nodded, feeling the settled presence in his botanical awareness. It's returning to its natural patterns. The counter-ritual worked, with some direct encouragement. You connected directly with the heart root, Neville said, his expression odd. That's something no one has done successfully in centuries. The texts all say the human mind can't withstand that level of botanical consciousness. It was overwhelming, Harry admitted. But the ancient helped me maintain my sense of self. It didn't want to consume me, it wanted to be understood. Snape approached, his dark eyes evaluating Harry with unusual intensity. Potter, what exactly did you experience when you touched the heart root? What did it offer you? Harry hesitated, surprised by Snape's perception. It offered me control. The chance to replace the thorn circle's influence with my own. He met Snape's gaze steadily. I refused. Something like approval flashed briefly across Snape's face before his usual impassive expression returned. A wiser choice than many adult wizards would have made in your position. Power of that magnitude rarely comes without significant costs. Before Harry could respond, Dumbledore's voice rang across the clearing. Well done, all of you. Exceptionally well done. They turned to see the headmaster entering the clearing, accompanied by Professor McGonagall and Augusta Longbottom. Behind them came several official-looking wizards whom Harry recognized as Aurors. Albus, Lucius Malfoy called from where he remained bound by living plants. This is outrageous. I demand to be released immediately. These children have assaulted members of prominent wizarding families engaged in legitimate magical research. Legitimate research? Augusta Longbottom scoffed, approaching the restrained wizard with remarkable fearlessness. The forced manipulation of a forest ancient is expressly forbidden by no fewer than 7 Wisengamot rulings, Lucius. As you well know. Not to mention the escape and harboring of a ministry prisoner, added a gruff Auror, securing Blackthorn with specialized magical restraints. That alone carries a minimum 10-year Azkaban sentence. As the Aurors began processing the captured Thorn Circle members, Dumbledore made his way to Harry's side. I received your message through the Sentinel network, he explained. Most ingenious use of the messenger beams to connect with the defensive plants. Once we realized what was happening, we summoned ministry assistance immediately. A bit late, as usual, Snape commented dryly. But effective nonetheless, Dumbledore replied mildly. Kingsley has been investigating the Thorn Circle for months. These arrests will provide the evidence he's been seeking regarding their broader activities. Harry was only half listening, his attention drawn back to the heart root. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, he could sense the ancient settling, its energy patterns stabilizing. But there was something else, a lingering connection, different from before. Not control or domination, but recognition. Acknowledgement between two conscious entities that had shared understanding. The ancient is changing, Harry said quietly. Not returning exactly to what it was before, but finding a new balance. As one must after such an experience, Dumbledore observed. Some transformations, once begun, cannot be completely reversed. They can only be integrated into a new form of being. Harry understood what Dumbledore meant. His own connection to plants had been irrevocably changed by this experience. The ancient would remain aware of him, as he would of it, not bound, not controlled, but connected through mutual recognition. As the cleanup and arrests continued around them, Harry finally allowed himself to feel the exhaustion of the night's events. His body ached from magical exertion, and his mind felt stretched from the botanical communion. You should return to the castle, Professor McGonagall suggested, noticing his fatigue. The Aurors can handle matters from here. Not yet, Harry replied, moving toward the heart root once more. There's something I need to do first. He approached the massive structure, now pulsing with calm, natural energy. Without touching it directly this time, Harry extended his awareness toward the ancient's consciousness. Thank you, he projected simply. For trusting me. For showing me another way to understand magic. The ancient's response came not as words but as impressions, gratitude, recognition, and something like invitation. Not a request to return, exactly, but an acknowledgement that Harry would always be welcome in its domain, always recognized as friend rather than intruder. "I'll help protect you," Harry promised. "Not by controlling, but by ensuring others understand what you are. What you should remain." As he stepped back, Harry felt a subtle shift in the forest around them. Plants that had been agitated and chaotic were settling into natural patterns. The excessive growth was already beginning to recede, balance returning to the ecosystem. It would take time for everything to normalize completely, but the process had begun. "The Sentinel network is stabilizing too," Harry noted, feeling the distant connection strengthening as the Ancients' influence returned to healthy patterns. "It will still help filter and protect, but it won't need to work as hard now." "A system of mutual support rather than defense," Augusta observed approvingly. "That's the true tradition of botanical magic, symbiosis, not subjugation." As they finally prepared to leave the clearing, Neville fell into step beside Harry. "So, what happens now? With your abilities, I mean. They're not just going to disappear." Harry considered this. His connection to plants had become a fundamental part of him, as natural as breathing, as integral as his magic itself. "I keep learning," he decided. "Not to control plants, but to understand them. To work with them." "You could revolutionize herbology," Neville suggested, excitement creeping into his tired voice. "The things we could discover together." Harry smiled at his friend's enthusiasm. "One step at a time. First, I think I need about 20 hours of sleep. After that, well, the Whomping Willow's been a pretty good teacher so far. And I've got excellent human teachers too." He nodded toward Professor Sprout and Augusta, who were deep in botanical discussion ahead of them. As they emerged from the forest onto the Hogwarts grounds, dawn was breaking over the castle. The sentinel plants stood at their positions, now pulsing with healthy, balanced energy rather than the strained defensive power they had maintained before. The Whomping Willow, visible in the distance, swayed gently in what almost looked like greeting. Through his botanical awareness, Harry could feel the entire grounds beginning to settle, plants returning to natural growth patterns, the excessive energy dissipating. Within days, most evidence of the disturbance would be gone, though the underlying connections, the new awareness that had awakened, would remain. Harry paused, looking back toward the forest. The Ancient's presence remained in his consciousness, distant now, but distinctive. Not controlling him, not controlled by him, but connected through mutual recognition and respect. A new kind of magic, perhaps, or the oldest kind rediscovered. "You know," Ron said, coming up beside him, "when this all started with you getting thrown into the Whomping Willow, I thought it was just another weird Harry Potter mishap." "It was," Harry replied with a tired smile. "Just turned out to be a useful one for once." "Useful?" Hermione repeated incredulously, limping up to join them with Neville's support. "Harry, you discovered an entire branch of forgotten magic, stopped a dark wizard conspiracy, and established communication with one of the rarest magical entities in Britain. That's a bit beyond useful." Harry shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I had a lot of help." "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Neville observed quietly. "Plant magic is all about connections, recognizing that no one exists entirely alone. Even the Ancient, for all its power, is really just part of a larger network." As they walked back toward the castle together, Harry reflected that Neville had captured something essential. His new abilities weren't about having power over plants, they were about understanding connections that had always existed but had been forgotten or ignored by modern wizardry. The Whomping Willow hadn't given him a weapon or a tool, it had shown him another way of experiencing the magical world. The sentinel plants acknowledged him as they passed, their leaves turning subtly toward him like so many attentive faces. Not subservient, not controlled, but allied, partners in maintaining the balance between the human and botanical worlds that shared this ancient magical ground. And in that network of connections, in that web of mutual recognition and respect, Harry Potter had found yet another unexpected place where he belonged. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.